right, good morning. I'm calling to order the remand hearing panel once again in the Eberhardt matter. Both parties are present, as well as Assemblymember Evans, Assemblymember Trainee, myself, Amy Domboski, and Special Counsel Joe Levesque, as well as Municipal Clerk Barbara Jones. This morning, before we start, I just want to have a brief discussion with both attorneys and ensure yesterday's proceedings. Are there any questions, concerns? Is there anything that needs to be addressed today that maybe you pondered last night you'd like to see gone differently?
I think it's moving along just fine from my perspective here. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't have any concerns, and I think we're fine time-wise. I doubt we'll use all of the allotted time tomorrow. So.
Okay. And that brings me to my second point. Mr. Owens, since you're still bringing your witnesses forward, how much more time do you anticipate needing to call your witnesses?
It's my best guess that I'll be done around midday today.
Okay, very good. And Mr. Staley, you think you'll be done?
Well, my anticipation is that we'll get through, a fair number of my witnesses today, and I might have one or two tomorrow, and then we would have closing arguments, and that would be it.
Okay, very, very good. Today we plan on breaking for lunch around noon. If there is if there's a natural break somewhere between after 11:30, we finish with a witness, then we'll break then. But somewhere around that time frame, we're going to try not to split a witness's testimony. So if Mr. Owens, you present, and Mr. Staley, you want to do cross-examine, we'll try to do it succinctly right at the same time rather than split that testimony in two parts. But otherwise, we will break today. I'm understanding that, Mr. Owens, you'd like at least 45 minutes for lunch.
That'd be 30 to 45 minutes. Should be fine, yes.
Okay. Is that sufficient, Mr. Staley?
That's sufficient. Again, I don't know that we need to cut it short, but that's sufficient. I just plan to get soup from the coffee shop or whatever, so.
Okay. Okay. Members, do you have any comments? Good reminder. So today we do have an assembly meeting that starts at 5 o'clock, so members will need some time to prepare. So we will be stopping tonight, the hearing at 4 o'clock, no later than that. Okay? All right. With that, Mr. Owens, you were on to your next witness?
Yes. We'd call Michelle Ramirez.
Welcome, ma'am. Could you just state your name and spell your last name for the record?
Michelle Ramirez, R-A-M-I-R-E-Z.
All right, Ms. Ramirez, can you please raise your right hand and face the municipal clerk? She'll be swearing you in.
Do you solemnly and sincerely swear or affirm that the answers you will give to the questions asked of you in these proceedings will be true? Thank you.
Oh, Elmo? Yep. There we go. We're up. Right.
Good morning, Ms. Ramirez.
Good morning, Mr. Owens.
Can you tell us what you do for work?
I currently own a little company called Michelle Associates, which is under contract to the water and wastewater utility through the end of June of next year.
And how long have you...
Mr. Owens, can you speak into the mic so we can hear you a little better? Thank you.
How long have you owned Michelle Associates?
I've owned it for 24 years.
And how long have you been principally employed there?
I took a break when I was working for the water and wastewater utility from 73 till I retired in 2007.
And what was your role with the water and wastewater utility?
I retired as the project support supervisor in the engineering division.
Can we take a brief pause? We're having microphone issues here. I think that sounds better already, Mr. Owens. Can you just restate your last
Testing?
question?
Okay.
Yeah.
The last question was, what did you do for Anchorage Water and Wastewater Utility?
I was hired as a receptionist in '73, but I retired as the project support supervisor for the engineering division in 2007.
And what does a project support supervisor's responsibilities entail?
I was responsible for managing the grant and loan program for the capital projects, as well as the capital budget reporting for the capital projects.
So grants and budget reporting,
Yes.
tell me a little bit about the activities involved in those positions.
I was responsible for making sure that all expenses that were incurred against a capital project were allocated for the proper, I'm trying to keep away from the AWU speak here, to the proper accounting string, that all supporting documentation was in the file for every expense of a capital project, and then turning around and using those expenses to seek reimbursement from the state of Alaska for any grants and loans that we had on those projects.
Okay. And did you have any involvement with the Marston Foraker lateral and water improvement districts?
Not while I was employed at the utilities so much. There were invoices that were starting to come through about the time I retired, because I think it's been around since 2004, the Pump Station 10 project had. Once I retired, I was a subcontractor to Montgomery Watson, or MWH Americas now. They were brought on board in a program management contract capacity. Part of it was responsible for establishing a project scheduling system, and the other part of that contract was for project managers to come in and manage certain capital projects that AWU had underway at the time.
In one of those contracts, did MWH have project management responsibilities for the Marston Foraker lateral and water improvement districts?
Yes, I believe they began with a project management contract, and then when the PMC, or the program management contract, was executed in 2007, right around there, they became the project manager, and Jeff Coleman became, with Montgomery Watson, became the project manager in charge of Pump Station 10 and the RID, LID, and WID projects.
And what was your role as a subcontractor to MWH?
I provided the advanced project administration to assist the project managers. They're dead set on getting the job done, and I made sure that the proper paperwork and the proper processes were followed.
I see. Could you explain what some of the priorities were from your area of involvement with respect to these projects?
My primary responsibility was just making sure that all the costs were getting allocated to the right project. I would help them. I'd review their change orders, their pay estimates, their contract amendments.
When you refer to they, are you talking about the contractor?
I'm talking about to assist the project manager. I didn't work directly with the contractor. I provided assistance to the project manager.
And did the project manager and his crew work with the contractor in managing and overseeing the work?
Yes.
Could you describe some of the steps taken to ensure accuracy of the cost accounting?
When an invoice or a pay estimate would come in, or even a change order, we would first make sure that the funding was there. A change order would increase funding, the funding needed for the project. The pay estimate would have the accounting to pay from an existing, what we call a purchase order. The construction contract with the contractor creates a purchase order, which creates an encumbrance in the project funding that secures that funding for nothing else but the construction contract. If the change order is executed, we need to make sure that there's additional funding available in that project to increase the encumbrance for the construction contract. And then as the invoices or pay estimates come through, we just make sure that all the rates are correct, the accounting string is correct, that the contract in place hasn't expired or needs a time extension. Typical project administration.
And did the contractor submit documentation that identified those contract numbers and strings and information that was used for accounting for the cost? Or did you, in some fashion, participate in that as well?
I believe the project manager would give the skeleton template to the contractor that would have that filled in, but through the course of a project, sometimes that changes. And so there was an interaction between the project manager and the contractor to make sure that that was correct. And the project manager would ask for my assistance to make sure that he was giving the contractor the correct information.
Okay. You've got two binders in front of you. The one on your right is the general exhibits, and I'd like you to open that to exhibit number under the tab E and E16 in particular. Should be pay estimate number 1 from Prue's Construction.
Okay.
You mentioned that the project manager gave a skeleton to the contractor, which they used in submitting pay requests.
That's correct.
Did this document here play a role in that process?
Yes, it did.
Could you explain, please?
This was the initial first pay estimate for the first payment to the contractor for work that was performed.
And would that document have been prepared by the contractor?
I believe Jeff prepared this one, Jeff Coleman, the Montgomery Watson project manager.
And what information would he use to prepare that?
He would have received a request for payment from the contractor that was in generally this format.
So are you describing a two-step process where the contractor would submit information and the project manager with Montgomery Watson would review that and prepare the pay estimate?
Yes,
And was this then approved by the contractor before submitting for payment?
yes,
So the contractor would double-check the project manager's work, and the project manager would double-check the contractor's submittal, and then it would go to AWU?
right, that's correct. The contractor would only be involved in the bottom line. The project manager had to make sure that all the proper accounting was in place.
And do you know whether, if you turn to the second page of this document, you'll see that there's a wider column called schedule, and it refers to schedules A, B, C, D, E, etc.
That's correct.
What's your understanding of those schedules?
My understanding is that each of the schedules represents a certain descriptive work, but the price of that work that was performed was broken, for Schedule A, B, and C was broken between two different project IDs.
Okay. Would there be more detail backing this up in this pay estimate?
Yes, the following pages back all of that up.
So the backup pages break down the detail of the charges that are rolled up on page 2?
That's correct.
Now, after the material, the pay request is submitted to AWWU, do you know what would happen next in the process of obtaining, securing payment?
The project manager would prepare the AWU portion of the pay estimate. It would go through my group at the time, which is called Project Controls, where we incur the cost in our project scheduling program, which is separate from the assistance that I would provide the project manager on this. Like, I would have reviewed this before Jeff would have submitted it to the contractor.
So on one side of what you did, you assisted in preparing the final each pay estimate
That's correct.
that got approved ultimately by the contractor before submitting.
That's correct.
And when it was submitted, would you then be involved in inputting that information into the accounting software for payment?
Into the scheduling, not the accounting. That's
see.
done by other people. It has to go through approval by the project manager, then Steve as the capital program manager, then the project support supervisor, then the division manager, and then the engineering division, or the AWU general manager.
And
Before-
that is all before it goes and a check is cut?
That's correct.
And the process of getting a check cut had its own internal controls?
Yes, it did.
Do you know how that works?
Not exactly.
Do you know what that system is called?
Well, they implemented it in accounts payable in the PeopleSoft system.
The famous PeopleSoft system?
Now, be nice.
If you could take a look at Exhibit E12. You recognize this document?
Yes, I do.
Could you tell the panel what this is?
Before we can enter into a construction contract, we had to receive approval by the board, the AWU Authority Board.
And is that what this document is?
Yes, this document approves the recommendation of award
To Prue's
to Bruce
Construction?
Construction
For which projects?
for the Pump Station 10 upgrade project,
Which consisted of,
the WID, the LID, and the RID as well.
as well as the Pump Station 10
Right.
project. Now, are those 4 projects identified and the source of funds for those identified?
Yes, they are.
Could you explain that, please?
At the time that this document was prepared, we did not have the funding in place from Public Works for their share of the RID, so we did substitute funding from Project ID number 2800 just to make sure and ensure the board that we had the money in the bank for the whole project. 3738 is the Pump Station 10 part, and 4615 was the Pump Station Water. 2903 and 2902 were the LID and WID, and then 2800 was a placeholder until we had the RID funding in place.
And how did those project IDs and the funds that are identified here play a role down the road as the work progressed?
This document right here would create that encumbrance in the PeopleSoft financial system where it would secure this funding and not to be used by anything else. Then the contract was, well, then came a change order, because at that time then we did have the funding from Public Works, so they did a change order to revise the funding sources to be from the RID part of the LID, project ID.
Can I paraphrase what you said?
Yeah.
Are you saying then that the money identified here as coming from 2,800 in the amount of $3,250,373 was later substituted with other money from the RID that was delivered to AWU for use on this project?
That's correct.
Now, did you encounter some challenges along the way of administering and allocating funds for these 4 projects?
Yes, we did. Jeff asked me sometime in the beginning of 2008 to begin participating in meetings and conversations with the Public Works Department because they realized that they were running out of money in their purchase orders to pay VEI, and it was because they had paid some of our invoices. So we have our own funding set up to pay VEI that's encumbered and can't be used for anything else except VEI. They had their funds for VEI, but they were paying for some of our work out of their funds. So there was some challenges, and we met as a group with members of Public Works. I can name them if you want.
No, it's okay. I'm
Okay.
just kind of
But the
describing the
process was, we
process
all
of what
sat
was
down
occurring.
and came to an agreement that we would, at that point, manage it through an Excel spreadsheet until the point wrapping it up and then making sure that everything got allocated the way it was supposed to. And in the end, that's what happened.
And then was the information used to develop the roles which were submitted for approval in 2011, 2012 timeframe?
That's correct.
And were those roles and that information subsequently reviewed for accuracy?
I only know that third hand. I wasn't part of that process, if that's what you're asking.
But
But
did
that
you
is the
become
process.
aware that there were some mistakes made in the allocation of costs in those projects?
Yes, there was.
And did that trigger any activity or response by you and your crew?
I was asked to, I can manipulate the financial information out of the PeopleSoft system in a much more user-friendly manner than what was available to the assessment folks. So I was asked to run a query on the project cost, manipulate it that was more useful to them, more to their understanding as well, and then go through and document each expense in the project with the appropriate invoice or pay estimate or change order in the file, and make sure that everything was correctly paid for.
And generally describe what sorts of corrections were discovered and made.
I recall maybe 4 invoices that had to be recoded that were, I know I made a mistake on one, Jeff made a mistake on one, Steve made a mistake on one, and Finance made a mistake on one. And to the tune of all 4 of those together, it was less than $10,000. And we discovered that and corrected that before the rolls were prepared. That was it.
Did you observe any charges from Pump Station 10 being assigned to any of the improvement districts?
No, I do recall that one invoice that was paid for the water improvement district should have been paid by Pump Station 10, and that transfer was made. Mm-hmm. That was the only involvement that involved Pump Station 10 in the whole process that I went through. That was the only instance.
And to your knowledge, were reallocations made in preparation of the revised roles that are being submitted today?
Yes.
And how did that occur?
That's handled by Brian Boss's group.
Mm-hmm.
We took the final costs and did a revised MOU with Public Works. They reimbursed us for certain excessive RID costs that we had paid for that had been originally included in the LID. So the overall total project cost didn't change. It was only a matter of reallocating between the 4 projects, actually just the 3.
Okay. And as you sit here today, do you believe that the final numbers for each of the 4 projects, the 3 improvement districts and Pump Station 10, the total project costs that were calculated and allocated are accurate?
Absolutely.
And do you believe that there's any Pump Station 10 funds allocated within any of the improvement districts?
Not at all.
Okay, that's all I have.
Good morning, Ms. Ramirez. I've got a few follow-up questions, not many. So, with regard to this Exhibit E12, am I correct in understanding that this this identification of certified funds that would be for the RID was actually not money from the municipality, it was money from AWU just sitting there sort of as a placeholder?
That's correct.
Okay. And do you know what the approved estimate was for the RID?
No.
Do you know how much was spent on engineering and such before the construction contract was awarded?
And I've heard 84,000, but no, I wasn't at the high level. I was in the trenches.
Do you know how much of the approved estimate was available for construction, the construction contract portion of the RID?
They can't go forward with the project without having the appropriate funding.
But again, do you know what that was?
If I were to look, I would assume that it's that 3.2 million.
Okay, you would assume that it's 3.2 million because that's the number here, but do you know?
No.
I mean, have you looked at the estimates that were established for the RID and how much was estimated for the construction contract and how much was estimated for the design and how much was estimated for contract oversight?
No.
And again, when they signed off on the contract and put this certified funding here, this wasn't actually real certified funding from the municipality for the RID. It was funding from AWU that was sitting there as a placeholder.
That's correct. AWU's part of the municipality, though.
And in 2008, in fact, we know that Public Works, not the AWU half of the municipality, but PM&E or Public Works half of the municipality, was seeming to be running short of the funds that it had for its project, correct?
I'm not aware of that. But it very well could be true, but I'm not aware of
Well,
it.
aren't you aware that, in fact, didn't you say that you got called into a meeting because that the funding had gone awry and that you had to sort out, and that the reason why they discovered it went awry was because Public Works was running out of money to pay VEI?
Well, there's a difference between running out of money and running out of money because they paid for our share of the project. So we would reimburse them, and so they wouldn't really be out of money.
Okay, and I didn't mean to say that it didn't get corrected or attempted to be corrected at some point, but am I correct in understanding that in this 2008 time period, that basically Public Works said, hey, we seem to be running out of money for our end of this project, correct?
Correct.
And then everybody got together and said, how are we going to sort this out, correct?
That's correct.
And basically what was agreed upon was that you would try and track things on an Excel spreadsheet instead of using the normal software that would be used, and then try and deal with it at the end of the project, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And this project was constructed in 2008 and 2009, correct?
Correct.
And then you had these Excel spreadsheets and whatnot, and you attempted to pull it together, if you will, at the end of the project to come up with these roles, correct?
That's correct.
And that didn't occur until 2011, correct?
That's correct.
And so there was considerable time trying to sort out this funding that had gone awry that was tracked on these Excel spreadsheets.
That's correct.
More than a year's worth of effort to try and sort all that out.
That's correct.
No further questions.
Just to be clear, the reference to the Excel spreadsheets and the effort to keep track of the VEI funds or charges, which is principally what those sheets were about, is that right?
That's correct.
They didn't entail the contractors' submittals, the
No.
spreadsheet information.
No.
So they didn't entail any of the contract costs. It was VEI's design expense.
Correct. And
Just
it had
keeping
nothing to do with
track.
Pump Station 10 either.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Any follow-up, Mr. Staley? Okay. Thank you, Ms. Ramirez. Any questions? I should ask any questions? No? Okay. Thank you. Mr. Owens, your next witness.
Okay.
Thank you, sir. Please step forward, state your first name, spell your last name, and then face the clerk to be sworn in.
I'm Russell Oswald.
Okay, can you speak into the mic for the record?
Russell Oswald, OSWALD.
Alrighty, and if you'll turn your attention to Ms. Jones, she'll swear you in.
Can you repeat that, please?
If you just face Ms. Jones, she'll go ahead and swear you in.
Please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly and sincerely swear or affirm that the answers you will give to the questions asked of you in these proceedings will be true?
I do.
Mr. Oswald, do you experience any difficulty in hearing?
I do.
Could you explain, is it affecting you today?
I had a brain tumor removed about 11 years ago, and it impacts my hearing in my right ear and in my left ear as well, mainly in my right ear.
Okay, are you able to hear us generally well if
I
we
can hear you
stick
well
to the
from
microphone?
behind, I could not. I asked the clerk yesterday for hearing apparatus. They didn't have them available.
Okay, but for purposes of our conversation now, you can hear us reasonably well?
I can hear you well, and I will ask you if I need you to repeat something.
Okay. So where are you currently employed?
I'm employed for the Department of Public Works Division of Project Management and Engineering. I've been there for 21 years.
And what is your role with the Department of Public Works?
I'm currently a project manager, manage the design and construction of road and drainage projects.
And as a project manager, what specifically are the responsibilities entailed with your particular project?
I oversee the development of the initial scoping and advertising for road and drainage projects, and then negotiate contracts for design, and then award construction projects, and go through work with our purchasing department to award construction projects, advertise and award construction projects.
You may need to bring the microphone a little bit closer. So you work with
Okay.
purchasing to secure, to let contracts out for bid as part of the project as well?
Yes.
And then are you involved in any of the cost accounting processes on a project?
I do track through and review pay estimates that come in, and then I work with our financial group to make sure we have funds available to keep things moving forward.
Do you get down in the weeds typically on individual line items and invoices, or is yours more of an oversight role?
Mainly it's broad overview, but when we're doing construction construction payments, we'll look at specific line items, specific work items that go through there.
And were you involved in the Marston Foraker Road and Drainage Improvement Project?
I was brought in into that project after the RID had been approved and moved forward, and at that time the Assembly had approved it, and at that time I was given that project to develop a RFP to go out with design and then follow it through construction.
And who became the design engineer for the project?
We awarded the contract to VEI.
So you were here yesterday and were able to observe and hear most of the presentation by the witnesses.
I believe so.
And so I'm not going to return all the information that we went over yesterday on how the district was formed, how the costs ended up going higher than expected at the point that the DSR was issued. But when in the course of that process between initial approval of the assembly or of the improvement districts and the budget estimates that were prepared for that, and the approval by the owners of that project, and what followed thereafter, did you have any involvement in the public outreach and effort to keep property owners informed?
Are you talking about the period of time between the initial assembly approval and then the re-ballot? Or are you talking about the initial approval when they...
I guess it would be from you, when you first got involved.
When I first got involved was after the initial approval. The original estimate had been developed and was approved by the property owners and then brought forth to the assembly for approval. And then I came in and we hired a designer, developed a preliminary estimate, cost estimate, and then went back to the property owners because we were so much higher than the initial estimate.
And did you participate in meetings and conversations with property owners to discuss the new
Many
estimate?
meetings with the property owners and surrounding public as a whole.
And did you get a sense that the property owners were well involved and informed about the information presented in the DSR?
Yes, I believe so.
Did you get a sense that they went through those estimates carefully and evaluated what was included in the work?
Yes, sir.
Did you have any reason to believe that the information provided wasn't understood and carefully evaluated?
No, I believe it was well understood and fully evaluated.
Did you believe that the information about the inclusion or not inclusion of shallow utilities in this project was understood?
Yes, I believe that was understood.
What's your sense of what the owner's intentions on that?
As far as the shallow utilities are, let's make clear on the definition of that. Are you defining shallow utilities as separate gas, electric, and telephone?
Correct.
The property owners were well aware that they were responsible for installation of that. That was brought up multiple times. And it was brought up by a couple of property owners that they knew that they could install it cheaper than we could anyhow.
And as the evaluation of the information in the design study report progressed, were the property owners aware of the recommendations by the Geotechnical Advisory Commission?
Yes, they were.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, they, as part of the initial assembly approval documents, we had to take this project to the Geotechnical Advisory Commission for review and recommendations. We developed the project parameters with our initial design study report, and we took it to the Advisory Commission, who and there were some of the property owners within that were attended those meetings as well. And the commission came out with a recommendation requiring us to get a third-party independent review because of the history of this area, and it is. I think we're all aware of what occurred in the 1964 earthquake in there. So they wanted to make sure that we went through, got the experts' opinions on how to approach this area. So we did that and followed through with the third-party independent review, took it back to the commission, and they agreed with the recommendations of Dr. Bray, who we hired as our third-party independent reviewer, and we moved forward with that.
Did you feel that the project management group had any discretion whether to accommodate the recommendations of the Geotechnical Advisory Commission?
Yes, we did have a discussion on that one, but we relied on what we believed to be the experts to move forward with our approach on the design for that project.
And with the assembly ordinance that established the districts, directing review by the GAC, what was the position of the project management team in following of the recommendations of the Geotechnical Advisory Commission?
We believed we were required to follow those recommendations.
Now, the Marston-Foraker Road itself, is there a process within Public Works for planning future needs of roads, identifying work that might be desired or planned for and funded? Do you have a process for looking down the road, identifying work you want to do, and trying to get it accomplished?
We have a capital improvement program.
And was the Marston-Foraker Road ever part of the capital improvement program, to your knowledge?
Not that I'm aware of. I haven't seen it on any portion of any list.
Was it an area that carried a good deal of traffic or likely to carry a good deal of traffic within the municipality?
I don't believe it would have made any list in the.
Was the municipality likely to build this road on its own if it hadn't been asked by the owners to do it in the context of an improvement district?
Not without request from the property owners.
And did the property owners promise to repay the cost of construction play a role in the city's decision to build it?
Yeah, as part of the RID agreement.
Now, in the spring of 2008, you had the design at a point of where you felt that you could develop the bid package for construction of these roads. Correct?
That's correct.
And There was we've heard some conversation by the property owners about the timing that the request for proposals was issued, and the sense that it might have been issued late, and that might have limited the number of people who were participating. Do you, in your experience of issuing requests for proposal, how sensitive are those to the time of the year that they are issued?
Well, I believe they were referring to the time of the summer that we did advertise this project to bid. Because of our unique bidding environment, we build roads in the summer. We have winters off essentially, and the process really used to be that we would bid projects in the wintertime or in the spring, early in the spring, and then we'd start building. And we still do that, but we have a lot of participation year-round. Projects just don't stop anymore. So we bid them at all times of year, and we get a lot of participation.
Do you feel that the fact that the proposals were solicited in June or July, whenever it was, resulted in a different outcome than they might have been if they were issued a month or two earlier?
I don't believe so.
And in your experience, have you observed any trend or process that's associated with that window of opportunity between April and June?
Not that I can point to. Every season's different. Every season's different.
Could you turn, if you would, to Exhibit E4? And perhaps before we get to that, would you take a look at E1? You recognize E1?
The invitation to bid?
Yes.
Yes.
And is that the invitation that was issued in connection with the Marston-Foraker Road Improvement and Special Improvement Districts?
Yes, I believe so.
Did this project involve any special instructions to bidders?
Outside of our normal type
Yes.
of construction, it did, in that the evaluation of the bids was to include the deductive alternates as well as the main base bid.
Could you turn to Exhibit E2?
Did you say C?
No, the next exhibit, E2.
Okay, the special provisions.
Are these a portion of the special provisions issued with the request for proposals for the Marston Pump Station 10 project?
These are the special provisions from the...
And if you turn to Article 3.14, does that describe how the successful bidder would be identified?
Article 3.4, the action on...
3.4, yes, I'm sorry.
3.4, the actions on bids.
Yes.
Yes.
How was the successful bidder intended to be selected in this request?
Well, for this one, we evaluated the base bid and the deductive alternates, and if any one of the deductive alternates exceeded the funds available for that deductive alternate, either the RID, the LID, or the WID were the deductive alternates, and the park improvements as well. If any one of them exceeded it, then we would not award the deductive alternate portion.
So it was a two-step evaluation, look at the total package, the total bid submitted, and then evaluate whether the individual components of D, E, and F were
That's
within the allowed budget.
That's correct.
And if you look at the last paragraph on this page, there's a reference to the engineer's estimate for the basic bid, and each project within the deductive alternate would be provided at bid opening. Do you see that?
That's correct.
Was the engineer's estimate provided to bidders in advance of the opening?
Yes, there was an engineer's estimate at the bid opening.
But was it provided to bidders before they submitted their bids?
Not before they submitted the bids. No, we brought the engineer's estimate to the bid opening.
And is it customary to issue the engineer's estimate before the bids are issued? Do contractors bidding on the project know it when they prepare their bids?
No, we wouldn't do that. We would do it. The only time they'd see it is at the time of the bid opening itself.
And then the next sentence here, additionally, maximum funding availability for each project within the deductive alternates will be provided at bid opening. What does that mean?
That means that the amount of dollars that we had available for each of the alternatives, or each of the separate alternates, was going to be shown on the bid so we could look at it right at the time of the bid opening, so the contractor would have an idea of if we're going to move forward or not.
And again, the deductive alternates were the work identified in exhibit in schedules D, E, and F.
Schedule D, E, and F.
So, okay, if you would then turn to E4.
The bid abstract.
Can you describe what this document is?
This is the handwritten notes that are put together by the purchasing department as they open each of the bids. So during the time of the bid opening, there'll be an envelope that each of the bidders will provide, and the project engineer will provide, and the purchasing department will open them up and write each of these down as they move forward.
So you're referring then to the columns, the first two columns are identified bidder, and it shows Roger Hickle and Pruse Construction. Do you see where I'm referring?
Yes.
And the information listed below, for example, the Hickle Contracting column,
That's right.
was information taken from the bid that was opened on the day.
That's
And it
right.
was
Those-
written down at that time? It was written down on this form
That's
at the
correct.
time of bid opening?
That's correct.
And so each of these items were the amount bid by Hickle for the particular schedule referred to.
Yes.
And similarly for Pruse.
Yes.
Was the engineer's estimate information in that column filled in at the time of bid opening, or did the purchasing department already have that there?
It was filled in at the time of the bid opening. They had the purchasing officer had not seen our engineer's estimate either. He opens up our engineer's estimate just like he'd open up a regular bid and fills these out and fills them
Okay.
out.
And how about the three items on the right, maximum available funds? There's an amount in the row for Schedule D, an amount in the row for Schedule E, and an amount in the row for Schedule F. What are those?
Those are the funds that we had programmed for each of the separate schedules. For the Schedule D, we had programmed the 2.7 million approximately shown based on the 35% estimate when we went back to the property owners. We knew that our total for all the work was we estimated at that time was $2.7 million. At the time of this bid, we had an engineer's estimate that was beyond that, but we knew that we had this money available, plus we had additional dollars available to go forward with what we thought the additional storm drain work was going to be required from Schedule B as well. So we had this 2.7 programmed in for Schedule D. So we thought we were being conservative with that.
What do you mean being conservative?
I mean, we thought we knew that if we used these dollars here for Schedule D, and that we thought we had additional dollars available to go with whatever would come, what we anticipated to come for Schedule B, and we knew how much had been expended already on the design for the RID. So we could go forward without exceeding the limits that had been balloted to the property owners. We thought that we were covered.
So does that $2.7 million, $2,715,45, is that representing the total amount of money available at this time for all of the work for the road improvement district?
It did not. At this time, we had programmed that in, but we had other dollars available. At this time, that represented our conservative estimate of what we needed to program in to have available to move forward with Schedule D.
With Schedule D.
For Schedule D.
And did there occur any complications during the bid opening and the submittals by the two contractors?
Was there a complication
Yeah.
in selecting the contractor? There was with Roger Hickel, and I can't speak to the specifics of that. Roger Hickel was the apparent low, but through the evaluation of bid process, they were allowed to back out of the bids.
So they ultimately were allowed to withdraw their bids?
They were allowed to withdraw their
And the award then went to Pruse?
the award did go to Pruse.
Are you familiar with the communications with the property owners during this time and events that occurred in connection with
I
that?
am familiar with that the property owners had discussions with the purchasing department.
And what's your understanding of the position of the property owners at that time?
The property owners approached our purchasing department about not accepting the bids. They felt that they could get a better price later, another year if we put it off a season or two, and the purchasing officer did not allow that to move forward.
Did he consult with you before making that decision?
He did ask if we verify the funds, and we verified we had funds available and that we were within the limits of the that had been approved by the RID to move forward.
But in terms of allowing Hickel to withdraw, did he seek your input on that?
He did not.
Did he seek your opinion or concurrence in his responses to the property owners about deferring award of the contract?
He did not. Can I clarify that?
Sure.
I do believe we had a discussion that that's what was going to occur, but he didn't ask me to verify that was the right way to go or anything. It was his approach.
It was his call?
Yeah.
Now, you were here yesterday and heard the discussion about how the components of Schedule B relating to the RID project, essentially the subdrain and storm drain systems that were identified in Schedule B, were a RID expense.
Yes.
And you heard that the cost of the subdrain pump station was 100% a RID expense.
Yes.
And did you concur with the information that was being provided yesterday about why that was?
I do. I agree with that.
And what's your understanding of why the subdrain pump station was appropriate for a RID expense?
Well, the subdrain's required for stability. Remember again, the overall stability of the areas, I think will forever be in question. But So the deep subdrain was necessary, and what again pointed out in our design study report as well. The location for it, because it had to be so deep, we couldn't open-end it. We had to have a pump station to move it out and to move the water away from the deep area, the deep well that's required to get the water that low and dry out the areas. So the location was a natural low spot to direct it away from the roads and from the properties.
Yesterday, there was some discussion also about some sort of drain stub-ins or drainage for particular lots. Was that factored into the construction district, what might be called footing drains or some means of draining water from each individual lot? Was that part of the road improvement district?
There was some discussion of that, but the discussion finally ended on the fact that each of those properties have a requirement to have engineered foundations. And while it's not unusual for properties to have to go be reviewed and all, these actually have to have engineered foundations to make sure that they're structurally capable of withstanding what can occur down there. And since that's attached to each property separately, and that's a requirement for a building permit on those sites, we backed away from that additional cost.
Just for clarity, you back away from what additional cost?
We backed away from providing stub outs to each site to connect to for connections to the storm drain or sub drain.
I see. Did the road, water, and sewer improvements, the progress of the work for the pump station and special improvements, this project, did it proceed according to schedule and generally according to plan?
I'd say yes. We did have to modify the schedule, our initial schedule, because of having to go back and reballot.
I'm talking about the actual construction
Oh,
process.
yes. I think it did. Yeah.
And did it come in generally on budget with a few change orders and allocations of that sort?
Generally, I'd say yes.
And are there any lingering claims, problems, material deficiencies in the work today?
No, not that I'm aware of.
So after the work when was the work performed? When was it finally closed out? Give us a little chronology.
The project was bid in 2008, bid and awarded in 2008. The large portion of the construction took place in 2009 and 2010. It went over a season, and we got final acceptance in the summer of 2010. And final acceptance means that we have essentially bought from the contractor the project. We agree that this project has been built to the standards that we bid and awarded. And at that point, we start a 1-year warranty, and then a year later, we go back in and look over everything to make sure that we don't have any major errors. Sometimes we have manholes that shift or something, or a storm drain collapses or something we have to go back in and fix. We didn't have any of that. And so the end of the warranty period was 2010, and that's when we start project closeout at that point.
So trying to make sure I understood what you said, the final pay estimate, if you take a look at that, that's exhibit E15. Check the date on that.
Okay, that's 2010,
October?
October of 2010.
Now, how does that coincide with the expiration of the warranty period? Does a final payment occur when the warranty is concluded and the project is completely done?
Yes.
And after that point, then you start assembling the information to develop the assessment roles.
At that point, that's when we can at that point.
And when were the roles at a point where they were released for public comment, to your knowledge?
I can't give you the exact dates. Sometime in 2011.
2011?
I believe that's right.
And after, there was a process, just kind of trying to keep this moving. We all know that ultimately the roles were approved in about February of 2012. There was a lawsuit that was commenced challenging those, and subsequently there was a review done by your department of the costs that were included in those roles. Is that right?
That's correct.
And what role did you play in that review?
Well, we looked at all the breakdown of how we came up with the percentage of the numbers and what was used to come into those percentages. And at that time, that's when I discovered that we had mistakenly charged a portion of the work from Lineary Park that I had agreed to during the early design process. I had agreed to some of the property owners that we wouldn't charge a portion of that work because while there's some overlap and the project did impact the entrance to Lineary and did impact some of the areas, we did add some additional landscaping and some additional amenities.
Okay, I want to make sure that this is, that I'm following you here. You were part of the review of the costs associated with the RID. And in the course of that, you observed that there were some charges to the RID that were inconsistent with promises you'd made to landowners?
That's correct.
Is that basically what you were saying?
That's right.
In preliminary meetings, you had met with owners and represented to them that they wouldn't be charged for lineary sorts of improvements? And is that, I'm paraphrasing here, I don't know if you're right.
That's right. I didn't catch it on my initial review.
And what was the sorts of charges that you caught?
What were the source of the charge?
No, what were they?
Approximately $15,000.
And relating to what?
They were charged to the RID mistakenly.
And what was the money spent on?
It was spent on some of the landscaping and fencing improvements that were done to the park or in and around Lineary Park.
Did the road affect Lineary Park?
The road did impact Lineary Park.
In what way?
Before the road went through, we had to move the trail to be able to build the road to our current standards. There was an existing trail that went down to by Lineary Park and tied to the coastal trail. We had to move that. We had to modify some of the landscaping that was in the area. We had to modify the entrance to the park itself. Some of the parking area was impacted.
And why did you have to make those adjustments?
Because the road, because there had never been a road down in that area, developed, a fully developed road. It was only access to the park, the ball fields down there. We had to, that access had been provided historically within the right-of-way, and we had to move it to build our curb and gutters and sidewalks.
So some of those features were within the right-of-way and had to be moved?
They were within the right-of-way.
And it would have been an appropriate cost for moving and replacing some of those features for the road to pay?
Yes, some of them are. Some of them are. The
But
majority of them are actually. But there were some amenities that we added that the property owners felt were beyond their what they should be participating in. And after we looked at it, we agreed.
And you had agreed with them that you wouldn't charge them for those amenities?
That's right.
And when you discovered that they had been charged for those amenities, what did you do?
We notified the courts that we had mistakenly charged them and we needed to reassess our roles.
And we went to the court, informed them of the mistake, and subsequently they redirected this process to the Assembly for reevaluation.
That's correct.
After the court directed a reevaluation, did you do further review and studies of the charges with the Road Improvement District?
We went through a full reevaluation of all the numbers and all the breakdown at that point. we started finding some other discrepancies of charges, and we started talking with AWW as well. And then we decided to have, they did an evaluation, and they recommended that we go with it and get an internal audit. So we had a audit done by muni auditors.
And were any of the charges that were found to be charges that should not have been charged at all to any of the projects?
Can you repeat that, please?
Were there any inappropriate charges in general that were discovered?
No, there was some charges that were incorrectly charged to the WID or LID that should have been charged to the RID, and some that vice versa, some that were charged into the RID that should have been charged to WID and LID as well. It turned out that through the audit, it turned out that we were able to catch those and correct those.
And what was the effect of the adjustments on the overall cost of the road?
It through the adjustments with the WID and LID and RID checks, we found that we were an additional $116,000 needed to be charged to the RID.
And how did that impact the overall budget for the road?
That increased the overall cost for the RID.
And how did that increased final cost compare to the amount that had been authorized by the property owners?
We are now over our 110% allowable.
So what is happening? Who's going to pay the difference for the amount over 110%?
The municipality's on the hook for it.
Are property owners being asked to pay anything more than what they agreed to?
They are not.
Do you recall how much that delta is, that difference is?
I don't recall off the top of my head. The property owners had approved $4,180,000 or
Whatever it was.
somewhere around there, and then I think we're about 90 to 100,000 difference, somewhere in there.
Okay.
I'm going from memory again. I'd have to look at the pay estimates.
So if you could take a look at, let me find this. Take a look at Exhibit G4.
G4. Okay.
Have you seen this document before?
I have. This is a spreadsheet that, we put together once we found the Lineary Park issue and started trying to track down what our share and what needed to be corrected.
So is this a summary of the adjustments made to the RID project and the Lineary Park project for purposes of developing the 2014 assessment rolls?
Yes, that's correct. The top half from cells 1 to 20 is for Lineary Park. The bottom half is the total adjustments made.
The bottom half was the total adjustments made for the road?
For the RID.
And at the bottom, you see that the adjusted total price for the road is $4,898,550.
Yes, that's correct.
And the total balloted cost of plus the 10% was $4,860,838.
That's correct.
And so the amount that the municipality is picking up is the difference between 4,898,550 and 4,860?
Approximately $40,000.
Okay. Let's talk for a minute about the Hitchens property. Are you familiar with that?
I am.
Could you take a look at exhibits A11 and A12?
I'm looking at A11.
Yes. Put on the screen the image that is A11. This is a 2006, you see in the lower corner, 2006 aerial photograph of the project area.
Okay, yeah, that's correct.
Do you see on this image the area or the lot which would have belonged to the Hitchens?
The area that...
The lot that would have belonged to the Hitchens?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do.
And which one are you looking at?
Lot 11, and they own lot 10 and 9 as well, I believe.
Okay, I believe actually it's lot 10, 9, and 8 is what we heard earlier. But where is lot 10 located on this image?
Where is lot 10?
Yes, that's the question.
Well, lot 10 is just right at past the end of the asphalt that you see on the drawing there, on the picture there.
So is it in the lower left-hand corner there, the third lot up from the bottom of the image?
Can you repeat?
Lower left-hand corner, third lot up on your image, on the lower left-hand corner,
Lower left-hand corner on the picture.
and the third lot up about where my pen is. Can you see that on the wall
Can I see what?
where my pen is?
I can't see it up there, but here I can see where the Hitchens house is, and their driveway coming off the end of the road.
So the small road I'm trying to make sure that we're looking at the same area. Is my pen, can you see it on the back wall? Is this?
I can see it better up there.
Is this the
There-
area that you're looking at?
That's the area I'm looking at, just above your pen there.
And that's where the road ended, the pre-existing
That was where the
road?
road ended. That's where the asphalt ended prior to our beginning our job. You can see where their driveway lies away from the trail. You can right where your pen is right there. Their driveway's on the right-hand side. The trail's on the left.
So is it within the existing right-of-way?
It was in the right-of-way. It was within the existing municipal right-of-way.
And was it built to full road standards?
No, it was just a gravel driveway and a gravel pad out there.
And if you could turn to Exhibit I3.
I-3?
Yes. I want to look at the second photograph there. Is this a depiction of the driveway from the ground level?
Yes, I believe that was it prior to us beginning our project.
And can you tell where the existing road ends and the driveway begins?
Approximately, you can, if you look on the right-hand side there, and you see you probably want to slide your photo over a little bit. Right? Yeah, you can see the bumper with the reflectors. That's the asphalt in front of that is approximately where the road ended.
And so the driveway is considerably narrower than the road was. It's not as wide as the road?
No, it's not. It was just a normal driveway width, about 12 feet wide is what I remember.
And looking again at Exhibit A, this was A12. This is a closer view of aerial photograph.
Okay, can you repeat the question, please?
Do you recognize this as being the area where the Hitchens home is located?
I do recognize.
And the lines that are on here, are those the subdivision lot lines superimposed over the image?
Those are.
And do you see the Hitchens home there in the driveway?
You can see where their driveway is within the municipal right-of-way and dropping down to the northeast down to their property.
And what is that path adjacent to their driveway?
That path on the left is the connection down to the coastal trail into Pete's Place, beyond Pete's Place, just north.
And earlier we were hearing some conversation about the cost of developing Pete's Place out and who paid for what portions of that. Does this image depict the area that was paid for as part of the road improvement district?
On this image, the light gray area, the existing trail, is in the location that's part of the RID improvement. That was covered under the RID.
And would that include the area all the way for the entire duration of what's shown on this image?
Yeah, all the way down to at the end of the light gray area. You can see that's on the left. That's Lot 2, and to the very north end of Lot 2, up on that. That was all part of on Pete's Place, part of the RID.
That was part, and where the RID improvement ended?
That's correct.
And north of that, continuing down to the pump station, was paid by what?
That's paid by AWW as part of the development of
I
Pump
see.
Station 10.
Okay. Could you take a look, please, at Exhibit A14?
14.
Oops, not that. Maybe. You recognize this photograph?
Yeah, that's a aerial photo of the taken after the improvements were built.
And again, the Hitchens property is located down in the lower left and depicted as Lot 10.
Yes.
Can you see my pen? Am I pointing at the right one?
Yeah, I see Lot 10.
Am I pointing at the correct one?
You are.
And what's the difference there with respect to the road?
Well, no, we have a driveway. We modified their driveway to make a connection into the road, and we provided on-site grading for drainage to address the changes that we'd made to be able to connect to the road and build the road itself to the correct slopes and grades. And you can see the curb and gutter and all going down.
Would you please take a look at Exhibit I-8?
I-8.
Are you familiar with with that image?
I am.
And what does it show?
This is the after photo from the Hitchens property that shows the curb and gutter line, and you can see a manhole, top intake manhole for the drainage area on their site, and that connects to our storm drain.
So there was improved drainage on the property as a result of that manhole?
Yeah, we had to be able to match the new grades for the road, we had to be able to take care of their drainage that had previously been just routing out to the right of way.
So the cost of the road, the gutter, the additional drainage were all associated with the road improvement district and benefited this property?
That's correct.
One last thing I wanted to touch base with. After the new estimates were developed in 2006 for completion of the work, and thereafter, did you have occasion to evaluate some of the costs that went up, the increased materials costs and the like that were part of the project?
Yes.
And did you evaluate the impact of that on the project? Did you ever see a chart, if you would look at Exhibit A9? Do you recall seeing this document before?
I do. It's been a while, but yeah, I do.
And could you describe the information that's contained here?
It's showing the increase in prices and the escalation of unit prices that occurred from 2002 to 2008. Remember, we had a huge jump in oil prices and all, and we had some other unit price jumps over the course of that period. 2 or 3 year period really is when it really jumped beyond just before 2008. So we had a pretty large change in our unit prices.
These are the unit prices for the items identified under bid item?
That's correct, and yes, that's correct.
So, for example, the backfill cost per unit increased from $11.29 to $17.75 between 2002 and 2008?
Yes.
And what's the percentage of increase that shows?
The percentages were quite large on all of them. You can look at some of them are between 50 to 150% increase. And
what was the source of this information?
Based on our average unit prices from that time period.
So this is data taken from actual bids submitted on other projects?
Construction projects that went to construction.
Okay. That's all the questions I have.
Okay.
Oh, absolutely. We'll take a 10-minute break. Okay, are we ready to get back started again?
We are, Madam Chair.
All right. Mr. Oswald, you are still under oath. So, Mr. Staley, if you go ahead and proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, Mr. Oswald, and I'll try and speak up. And if you have trouble hearing me, just let me know.
I won't hesitate.
Okay. I want to start, well, first of all, who is Mr. Lamson?
He was our capital improvement coordinator at the time that this RID was put together.
Okay, so basically you and he had very similar positions with the municipality?
No, we did not. He worked with helping develop capital improvement project initial cost estimates and worked with property owners who would come in and petition for RIDs and that type of thing, and put together the initial estimates and assembly documentation through the initial approval to get the project started.
Okay, and you're aware that he did that with respect to this for a period of time, correct?
I am aware of
Okay.
that.
And then at some point, he more or less wasn't in the picture anymore and you were, is that right?
That's correct. We kept him in the loop with this thing all the way through, so he was aware of the changes and why the changes were there for future RIDs.
Okay. At some point, he retired, though?
He did retire a few years ago.
Yeah, okay. And you were not involved in the very beginning portion of this project, correct?
I was not.
Okay. And so I want to talk a little bit about the McLeod's property and the Hitchens property. And do you know who the McLeod's are?
I do.
And who are the McLeod's?
The McLeod's are the property right at the end of the existing road, the road that was existing prior to this project going through, the end of the asphalt and the curb and gutter. They are on the east side, the northeast side of the road.
So if you'll look at Exhibit A12, I encourage you to look at your own exhibits because these photos don't come up very clearly, but
A12.
okay, and looking at A12, where would the McLeod's be if you know?
They are the property with the looks like a white vehicle in their driveway,
Okay.
right at the end there, right by this where the split from the Hitchens driveway.
Lot 11, I'm showing with the pointer up here right there.
Right there, yeah,
Okay.
right there.
And so we can see that the road doesn't go to the end of their property, does it?
It does not.
Okay. And so basically it dead-ended very near the what would be the south end of their property, and then there's their drive that comes off, there's the Hitchens drive that comes off, and the trail that comes off, correct?
That's correct.
Now, when this road got put in, that road was completely rebuilt in front of their house, correct?
I believe for the most part it was. It may have been just up to their driveway, but I'd have to look at the plans. But I think it was rebuilt. A portion of it was in front of their driveway, in front of their house and driveway.
If you'll look at Exhibit A6, I mean, this is a map of the improvement district. And indeed, the improvement district starts on the south side of their house, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And then if you'll look at A14, you can indeed see that there's a new road with gutters on both sides all the way to the south side of their house, correct?
I concur.
Okay. So there's no doubt that that road was rebuilt in front of their house. Correct?
I agree. By this photo, it looks like a brand new curb and gutter in front of their house and across the street as well. At that limit.
Now, order to build this road, rebuild this road in front of their house where they had an existing drive, there had to be an accommodation for their driveway too in the way it interacted with the road, correct?
It had to be some sort of a match made there.
Okay. And so in fact, you said that with regard to the Hitchens, there had to be some sort of what was formerly the Hitchens property, there had to be some sort of an accommodation to match the road to their new drive. The same thing happened with regard to the McLeods, correct?
The what you're calling formerly the Hitchens property was right-of-way that we modified, that we went back in and regraded. That was municipal right-of-way that they had their driveway and all those improvements built on. The portion of the road that we rebuilt on in front of the McLeods was the existing asphalt that we had to regrade to match the new road connection.
I understand that, sir.
Okay.
I'm not talking about, well, first of all, let me ask you this. You're not the right-of-way officer with the municipality.
I
are
am
you?
not. I am not.
Okay.
the right-of-way officer.
And I've dealt with the right-of-way officer at the municipality. In fact, I have a very similar situation up on the hillside where the municipal right-of-way is 100 feet, actually. The municipality actually only uses 25 or 30 of it in the north end of it, and or east end of it, I guess it actually is. And it dead ends at my property, and the only way for me to get to my property is to use the rest of the right-of-way to get to my property because they haven't used the right-of-way that abuts my property. And I asked the right-of-way officer, can I use that to build my drive? He said, of course you can. You can even build a little parking area up there because your drive's going to have a slope. If you don't want to use that in the winter, you don't have to. You don't dispute that, do you?
I can't. I don't know anything about it.
Okay. And so if the municipality wants to take that position, they should call the right-of-way officer here, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay. And with regard to both the Hitchens and the McLeods, with regard to the way that the road was going to impact, you understand, first of all, take a look at I-3, page 2.
The before picture.
Pardon?
The before picture.
Yeah, that's their drive, correct?
That's correct.
And you said it was gravel, but in fact it's not gravel, that's pavement, isn't it?
It's either gravel. I thought it was either gravel or maybe wrapped, recycled asphalt that's put over the over a gravel surface to make it hard. But it wasn't fully paved to a road standard.
Certainly looks like pavement in here. It doesn't look like gravel to me. Does this look like gravel to you?
Well, again, wrapped, recycled asphalt can look like pavement as it breaks down.
And so the drive went from the dead end of Marston, curved around, and then they actually had a parking area in front of their house and everything, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. And so when the road got built in front of both the Hitchens and the McLeods, there had to be some sort of an accommodation made for the way that that road was going to impact the level or height of their driveways, correct?
That's correct.
And that's true with regard to both the McLeods and the Hitchens, correct?
Yes, at different levels of impact. Yes.
If you'll take a look at exhibit number 99. Well, perhaps I'm going to just take a page from exhibit 99 and put it up because I don't know exactly how to get you there. But from exhibit 99, there is this drawing. And we can see that here it says lot 11 driveway. Do you see that?
Yes.
And over here it says lot 10 driveway. Do you see that?
Yes.
Okay. And then we have a drawing at the top of the page which shows how the road, in fact, is going to be impacted regarding those drives.
Yeah,
correct?
it shows the existing asphalt and then the proposed limits of the new road.
Okay. And right here, this is the lot line between them, correct?
It looks like it, yes.
Okay. And so all of this road was built in front of the McLeods, correct?
That's correct.
portion of their old driveway was either taken out or extended or whatever, and there was an accommodation made for how it was going to impact the road and their drive, correct?
That's correct.
Now, you talked about what you said were some other work that was done for what was formerly the Hitchens property. And we looked at I-8. This is the way that lot 11 drive is with regard to the way it impacts the new road, correct?
That's correct.
You talked about, well, we did some stuff with drainage and stuff, correct?
Yes.
Do you know what an easement is?
Yes.
Okay, and what's an easement?
An easement is a piece of typically a private parcel or public parcel that's used to put a utility or a storm drain in.
Okay, so if I own property and the municipality wants to put something on there, you know, a utility or something like that, they obtain an easement from me, correct?
Yes, we're supposed to.
And as the property owner that's giving the easement, I'm the one burdened by that easement. My property is burdened with the easement, correct?
That's correct.
And the municipality is benefited, correct?
Depending on the easement, sure.
And so the one who gives the easement is burdened, the one who gets the easement is benefited. That's the way an easement works, right?
That's the idea.
Okay. Isn't it true that what happened with regard to that lot 11 is that the municipality and or its contractor actually obtained 2 easements from lot 11, didn't it?
I don't remember how many easements we got there, but I think we did get multiple easements on that, overlying that site.
One of them was a temporary construction easement allowing you to put material or other things on their property during this construction, correct?
That's correct, to allow us to work on the property. We can't work on any private parcel without one.
Okay, and I'm looking at Exhibit 99, page 32 of 70, and this in fact shows this temporary construction easement that you obtained from the owners of Lot 11, allowing you to utilize their property during construction, correct?
That's what it would be for if that's a TCP.
And I'm looking at Exhibit 99, page 33, and this is called a drainage easement. And so the municipality, in fact, obtained an easement from these property owners saying, can we please put drainage in this area on your property, correct?
I believe that was to pick up the on-site drainage. It was through negotiations with the property owner to pick up the on-site drainage and put it into our system.
Okay, but it's drainage that might be coming off of the road system, correct? That could, if it's not drained in the roadway, it could flood their property, and so the municipality obtained an easement to put the drain actually in their driveway.
I think if you look at the photo that you have here, the drainage from the roadway is captured in our curb and gutter system here. This is really drainage from the surrounding area that coming down to this low point, because we had to regrade this area, remember? That's why we have the TCP. So we had to regrade their area because of the impacts that our new road system was putting onto this overall area. And that was the way we could capture their on-site drainage and get it away from there.
Okay, but this,
It's not for the road, it's for their on-site drainage.
well, sir, that road, looking again at I-8, there can be runoff, and you realize, don't you, sir, that roadways are a source of runoff, correct?
Yes,
The fact that you have a slick surface a black surface, it heats, snow melts, that can be a source of runoff or water, correct? That's why they put storm drains in roadways, correct?
I agree.
Okay, and so there can be runoff coming from this area that can impact this property, and if it's not drained in, if there isn't a drain in the roadway itself, it can go onto people's property, correct?
That's true.
Okay, and you obtained an easement from the owners of this lot in order to put a drain to capture that runoff, correct?
We put the storm drain in there to capture the on-site drainage. There, I'm sure that, and we're tying into this new storm drain system we put into the roadway.
Well, you have an easement for that, though, right?
We do, and we are responsible for maintaining that manhole in that system.
Now, with regard to the McLeod's property, you understand that there was some sort of an accommodation that was made for their property with regard to the amount that it would be assessed, correct?
I understand that. I saw that paperwork come through.
And I'd like you to take a look at I-4. And this is a series of emails from Mr. McLeod to Mr. Lamson and Mr. Lamson back. And if you look at what is labeled as page 3 of 4 of Exhibit I-4, the first email from Mr. McLeod to Mr. Lamson, dated September 30th. And I don't want to spend a lot of time on this. Take your time to read it if you want. But basically, he's saying, I think you've inappropriately included us in this improvement district because we already have access, and so we don't really benefit from this road. And so if you look then on the second page of this exhibit, Mr. Lamson's response. I've highlighted a couple of paragraphs, and the first of which states that, you know, your lot is included because the road is going to be upgraded entire width, curb and gutter, and a new road base all along the frontage of your lot. Do you see that?
Yes.
And indeed, we saw that in the photos, and you
Yep.
don't disagree with me that that
I don't
happens, correct?
disagree on that.
But he states that, Mr. McLeod raises an interesting question because the intent of the code is to have assessments that are proportionate to the benefit. And that there's an argument can be made that you have less benefit than those with no access at all. Do you see that?
I see that.
Okay. And again, an accommodation was made with the McLeods. You didn't participate in that. You really don't know exactly what it was.
I don't. I'm not at that level. I keep out of that stuff.
And in fact, you aren't really all that familiar with the code and its requirements for assessments in terms of whether or not the amount of the assessment should bear some relationship to the benefit conferred, are you?
It's not something I work with every day, no. No, just enough to know that some of the overall, help with some of the overall calculations when needed.
What was the funding source for the improvements to Lineary Park?
Of what we used for
Well-
our improvements for Lineary Park?
Well, when you were putting this out for the bid, what was the funding source?
The overall project funding was from bond funds, I believe.
Okay.
But for the improvements on Lineary Park, I had to go back and find funds from, I think it was still bond funds, or I'd have to check. It might have been a grant, because I don't think bonds can be spent on parks.
Okay, but Schedule G, if you will, in the bid, you understand that Schedule G was Lineary Park, correct?
That's correct.
It had a funding source separate and apart from the improvement district.
It did.
Okay. And so it wasn't just a matter of your having made a promise to the property owners that those Lineary Park improvements wouldn't be paid by the improvement district, but it actually had a separate funding source.
I believe that's right. As far as the removal of those improvements, that was because of the discussion I had with the property owners. Removal of the improvements from the RID.
Now, it's your testimony today, sir, that gosh, those Lineary Park improvements got put into the rolls for this improvement district the first time we took it to the assembly by mistake. And once I realized it, and I realized that this breached my promise to the property owners that they wouldn't be in there, I corrected it, correct?
That's right.
Take a look at Exhibit G5, page 55 of 94. Isn't this an email that indicates that you're copied on it, that indicates that, gosh, we're going to keep those in there?
A portion of Schedule G was left in there. As stated earlier, not all of Lineary Park improvements were taken out, but a portion of it was.
Do you know what crews bid to build the improvements to Lineary Park?
I don't know off the top of my head. I'd have to look at the actual bid.
Do you have that bid abstract? Remember the number for that, Bob? You know, the handwritten one. I'm gonna look at.
E4, maybe?
Yeah. E4, please. Take a look at E4.
E4. G4.
That's the bid abstract, or what was looked at in terms of what each of the bidders bid, what the engineer's estimate was, and the maximum available funds. Do you recall that?
Sure.
And Schedule G, Hickel bid 36.9, Cruz bid 44.1, the engineer's estimate was 44, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And so he basically bid 44,000, just slightly under the engineer's estimate.
That's correct.
Take a look at G4. This is the calculation of the assessments after accounting adjustments for the RID, correct?
That's correct.
And this shows that basically $47,000 from Lineary Park are being assessed to the property owners, correct?
That's what it shows.
I think in the pocket of one of those, you'll find exhibits N1 and N2.
In one of yours? Or
No, it should be the municipalities. I think Madam Clerk put them in there today. These are the new exhibits that the municipality introduced for the first time yesterday.
You're correct, Mr. Staley. They're in the pocket in the book that
He
is.
found them. Thank you.
I've got it.
Okay, so N1 regards the LID, correct? The Lateral Improvement District?
Yes.
Okay. And at the top of N1, we've got certain items that are considered a construction cost, and even with a contingency fee of 15%, it's $840,000. Do you see that? The very top
Yes.
portion here?
Yes, I'm seeing that.
Okay. And then the next item says, note the following items of work are funded in part by the LID, but will be constructed with the PS10 upgrade project. Do you see that?
I do see that.
And you understand that basically what happened was there were you understood that when it went to bid, there were schedules A, B, and C that were the base bid, correct?
That's correct.
And that was for Pump Station 10, correct?
That was for Pump Station 10 and some of the other improvements, as it's stated here. There's other improvements associated with it.
Okay, and so what this middle paragraph is this is items from either Schedule A, B, or C that were going to be transferred to the LID.
That are part of the LID improvement.
And we're going to be funded by the LID according
correct.
to the way that AWWU was planning this out, correct?
That's what it appears to be.
Okay, and so the total LID construction cost, do you see that? Can you read that, what that is?
The total LID construction cost is $1,088,660. This is for the 35% design estimate.
Okay,
So this isn't for the actual bid or the actual construction.
Well, this is the estimate that was used to go and get the voters' approval,
To
correct?
reballot, the 35% estimate is where we had gone through and evaluated the project parameters and come up with a up-to-date full estimate for the cost for all portions of the project.
And if you go ahead and take a look at C10,
C10?
Charlie 10, this is the Assembly memorandum to have an ordinance passed approving these new lid costs, and you can see that same figure, $1,663,105.05, correct?
That's correct.
And again, I'm looking again at N1, so the total project cost was $1,006,000. The lid construction cost was $1,088,860, correct?
That was the
The estimate.
35% estimate was $1,088,000. That's right.
Right. So that's the estimate, and it includes the amounts from Schedules A, B, or C that are going to be reallocated to the lid.
That was the estimate at that time.
Okay.
That's right.
And now if we take a look at Exhibit E4, and we look at the lid, which is Schedule E, we can see the maximum available funding is the exact same number, correct? $1,088,660.
That's correct.
Take a look at N2. You have N2?
I do.
Okay, and again, this is the width, correct? Same thing, the engineer's 35% estimate, correct?
That's correct.
And at the top, we have construction costs with a contingency of 733,761. Then the middle paragraph is items from Schedules A, B, or C that are going to be paid for by the WID, correct?
That's correct.
So we have total WID construction costs of 842,238. Do you see that?
$842,238. Yes.
Then we have total project costs of $1,229,181. Do you see that?
I do.
Okay. And I'll represent you, sir, that there's an ordinance that basically says that that amount is approved, that total project cost is approved. I don't suppose you are going to question that, are you?
I'm not going to question.
Okay.
No.
I want to focus again on total WID construction costs, not just for the top portion, but the top plus the amount from Schedules A through C that are going to be allocated to the WID. That total number is 842,238, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And then I want to look again at Schedule E4. Schedule F is the WID. The maximum available funding is that exact same number, correct?
That's correct.
Take a look, if you will, at Exhibit C4. This is the same engineer's estimate, 35% complete for the RID, correct?
That's correct.
And on the first page, we have the first construction cost estimate of $2.338 million. On the second page, we add in again those portions that are going to be allocated to the RID from Schedules A through C. Do you see that?
I see that.
For total construction costs of $2,701,545. Do you see that?
I see that.
Total project costs of $4,418,944, correct?
I see that.
And that $4,418,944, that's what was used to get the blessing of the property owners, correct?
That's correct.
And this $2,701,545, again, is the exact same number on E4 in terms of the maximum available funding, correct?
That's correct.
And so that maximum available funding for each of these improvement districts was set forth on those bids, correct? Or not bids, estimates. I misspoke.
No, those were estimates. That's a 35% estimate.
I understand.
We use it for planning purposes.
I understand, sir, but this document here, E4, was put forth to determine whether or not any of these bids came in too high, correct?
That's correct.
And you had to do that, didn't you? Because the request for proposal that went out said, if any one of these comes in over the maximum available funds, then none of these are going to go forward, correct?
That's correct.
And indeed, you said that, gosh, when we open the bids, we're going to have those numbers for you, correct?
We did say that.
We've got them ahead of time because we got the estimates. We got N1, N2, and Charlie 4 for each of the three different ones that give us those estimates, correct?
No, those are not the engineer's estimate. The engineer's estimates are what was developed between that period when N1, N2, and Charlie 4 were developed and going to bid. The engineer's estimate was based on the final design product that was bid and awarded.
I'm not talking about the engineer's estimate. I'm talking about these are the documents, N1, N2, Charlie 4, that were approved by the property owners, correct?
No, the total number was approved by the property owners.
Yes.
That's correct.
And so each one of those has a total project cost. That's what went to the assembly. That's what went to the property owners, correct?
The totals are what went to the assembly and the property.
And each one of them has a total construction cost that includes not just those items on schedules D, E, or F, but it includes the amount on schedule D, E, or F, plus whatever they plan to allocate from A, B, or C, correct?
Our total construction costs for those estimates at that time.
Okay. And those estimates are the exact same numbers that we see on E4 here, identified as maximum available funds, correct?
For that time, that's
And this is what was disclosed at the opening of the bids, correct?
correct.
And yet the amount Cruz bid for the RID, which includes not just Schedule D, but those items from Schedule B that they were planning to allocate over, far exceeded that, didn't it?
Again, our 2.7 shown on here as available was what we used and programmed available for Schedule D, and we used that based on our previous estimates. We knew going in, we believed going in that we conservatively could use that 2.7 from our 35%, which included everything, 2.7, and still had money available to cover what would be built as part of B, and still be within the approved limits of the RID.
Sir, that's not what the RFP said, is it? That's not what the invitation to bid said, is it? The invitation
That's what the invitation to bid said, available funds, and that's what we had programmed for available funds for Schedule D. That's what we had programmed. It doesn't say that we're going to take A, B, and C out of it, where it says we're going to take our programmable funds, our available funds for Schedule D, and that's what we're going to show, and that's what we showed.
What you told the potential bidders, and what you told the property owners was that these improvement districts had certain funds available for construction, correct?
We told the property owners that we thought that the entire project would cost $4.4 million.
Well, a letter went out to the property owners telling them that this was going to be bid and schedules, correct?
Yes,
And a letter went out to that letter that went out to the property owners said, and if the bids for any one of the improvement districts come in higher than max available funds, none of the improvement district work is going to go forward, correct?
that's true.
And that's the same thing that was told to potential bidders, correct?
Yes,
And in the invitation to bid, it said, and upon opening, we're going to show you what that maximum is, correct?
and we did.
And that maximum figure came from each of these estimates, included not just the schedules D, E, or F, but it included the amounts that were going to be shifted over from A, B, and C, correct?
No, we used that estimate to be able to give us a comfort level to be able to say, yeah, we can do it for this and still be able to do the work on B. We had programmed the funds for Schedule D.
Well, the
And
invitation
it still
to
be
bid-
within the limits of the approved RID.
Sir, the invitation to bid didn't say, and upon bid opening, we're going to show you what's available, but there might be more, there might be less, and that's not what it said, is it?
No,
What it said was, upon bid opening, we're going to show you what's available, correct?
and that's what we had available. That's what we showed.
And the amount that you showed, again, for the WID as available was 842,238, correct? That's what you showed available.
It shows what's available. It shows what we had on the 35% drawing.
And it shows what was available not just for the Schedule F, but what was available for the Schedule F and what was going to be allocated to it from Schedules A through C, correct?
Again, a planning level document.
Okay, but that's the number. That's the source of the number for the maximum available funding that's shown here on E4. That's the source of it, isn't it?
That's what we use to develop to set our maximum available funding for each one of those.
Okay, so you use these estimates to set your maximum available funding for each one of these, and the estimate that you used included not just the Schedule F items, but the Schedule F items and the items from Schedules A, B, or C that were going to be allocated to it.
It gave us a buffer, a planning buffer for our funding sources, which is very common when we're planning our funding level.
That's the source of the maximum available funding, isn't it, sir, these estimates?
That's the source that we use to develop and provide the maximum available funding for Schedule D.
Now, we know that when you look at Prue's bid for the RID, the total bid for the RID is $3,206,000, correct? I'm looking at Exhibit E3, first page of E3.
That's from the total from Schedule D plus the improvement from Schedule B.
Okay. So that total was supposed to match what's on Charlie 4, page 2, the total for the RID construction, including both Schedule D and Schedule B items, correct?
No, that's not correct. C4 is a 35% level document.
I understand that, but that's
Okay.
the source of that maximum available funding number, isn't it?
No, that's not correct. That's not correct. That's a planning level document.
Well, sir, that number matches exactly.
I understand that. We use that as a placeholder to hold our funds to plan for original dollars. And then we had, as I said earlier, I guess not clearly, but we had planned, believed we could cover that plus whatever B came in at. And it turns out we could.
Well, sir, again, Charlie 4 includes not just D, but it includes B, correct? Charlie 4, the first page is Schedule D items, correct? The engineer's estimate, correct?
Yes, 35%.
And the second page are the Schedule B items that are anticipated will be allocated over.
Again, 35%.
35%. And it comes up with a total construction cost of 2.7, correct?
Again, 35%.
Again, 35%. And that's the same thing for the WID and the LID in N1 and N2, all at 35%, but you came up with a total construction cost, including not just Schedules D, E, and F, but Schedules D, E, and F plus whatever was going to come over from A, B, and C.
Those are, again, planning level that we were able to establish. We just said we will use these to put in for Schedule D, thinking that we can cover the other costs and still be within our allowable limits for the other improvements for A, B, and C.
The amount...
And it gives us a little bit of breathing room, safety. That's, again, not an unusual planning approach.
The total amount bid by Prus for the road, when you compare it to that 35% planning level number, that 2.7 number, it's $500,000 more, basically, correct? 2.7 to 3.2 is $500,000.
Approximately.
And if we look at G4, which is this RID accounting after all of these adjustments have been made, we can see that the total expenses, even after you've deducted $15,000 for your correction on Lineary Park, is approximately 4.9, correct?
Approximately. Excuse me. That's correct.
And the amount balloted was 4.4, correct?
That's correct.
Again, about a $500,000 difference, correct?
Approximately.
You take a look at A7. This is the graphic depiction, if you will, of the pump station rebuild, correct?
That's correct.
And I know you're not the engineer who designed it, but do you agree with me that all of these parts are necessary for the pump station to function as a pump station?
I do not. I don't think the configuration of the deep subdrain would have been. I'm actually in agreement with some of the comments made yesterday that the deep subdrain could have been routed differently or done differently.
Okay, I'm gonna defer to the engineer who designed the project. Go further on that. Let me just ask you a different question. There had to be access to this pump station, correct?
There does.
Okay.
That's correct.
And this is the access route coming all the way down here, correct?
Yes, it is.
There's no ability to get to this part of the road without coming down this part of the road, correct?
That's correct.
So in order to have access to this, it has to utilize this road, correct?
Has to utilize the right-of-way. That's correct.
And you were the one responsible, or at least partially responsible, for sort of negotiating with AWWU in terms of how costs would be split or shared, correct?
Yes, yes, I was.
And you
I
didn't-
was involved with the negotiation.
Okay, and you didn't have any discussions with them about whether they should pay some share of that access road, correct?
They did pay a share of that access road.
Well, they didn't pay anything from the start of it until the end of Lot 2, correct?
Lot 2, the RID participants responsible for
north.
road improvements up to the end of the RID limits, which is the end of Lot 2.
Okay, and that's because that is the end of the improvement district, correct?
That's the end of the district.
It doesn't go any further beyond that, correct?
That's right,
Okay,
along Pete's Place.
correct.
Yeah.
And so they wouldn't want to, you wouldn't have them pay for something that goes beyond the district, would you?
No,
You wouldn't have them pay for doing something over in Spenard, would you? Of course not, right?
No.
So they paid for all of that, but AWWU needs to use it, and you didn't negotiate for them to share any of that cost, did you?
they did share that cost. They paid their portion from the end of the road into their subdivision.
So they paid their own
Into
costs.
their-
They paid their own costs,
They
correct?
paid their own costs, that's right.
But they didn't pay any share of the cost to get to this point on the map, did they?
No, they did not.
So you never saw Shannon and Wilson's geotechnical report for the pump station, did you?
I don't believe I did.
And so you don't know what was in there with regard to the requirement for subdrains with regard to the pump station, correct?
I can't speak to those.
Okay, so you just don't know what Shannon and Wilson said and or even what VEI said was necessary for the pump station with regard to subdrains, correct?
That's correct for the pump station 10.
Okay. And yet you were the one that was responsible on the municipality side with negotiating with AWWU with regard to how those costs would be shared, correct?
For the subdrain, you mean?
Yeah.
I was responsible for that. That's correct.
Okay.
For PM&E side.
And so don't you feel like you were a little bit at a disadvantage in negotiating with AWWU in terms of how those costs would be shared if you don't even know what was required for their end of the project? You don't know what Shannon and Wilson said was required with regard to subdrains for that pump station, and yet you're negotiating with them in terms of whether they'll pay for any of that cost?
I think I can rely on my design group that was part of both evaluations, to which they did have in the design study report, of what was necessary for the interaction between the two.
Okay, and so we should probably defer to that design group, that's VEI, in terms of what was required for that pump station.
It's in the design study report. And that's what we relied on to make the negotiation.
These deep subdrains, they're generally not in roads, are they?
Generally not.
And in fact, on the east side of Lineary Park, there was an improvement district where roads were put in I think former Governor Sheffield has a home there. The Rasmussens have a home there. You're familiar with that area, correct?
I'm familiar with the area.
And they had to go in front of the Geotechnical Commission in order to get that approved, didn't they?
I don't know. I wasn't part of that.
Well, you're aware that the restrictions, if you will, on rebuilding in the area that we're talking about now, this improvement district, those same restrictions applied on the other side, correct?
I believe there are that whole area, that entire
Okay.
redevelopment for all the old landslide area.
And you're aware that when they rebuilt that area for those homes over there for former Governor Sheffield and the Rasmussens, there was no deep subdrain put in there, correct?
I don't know that. I haven't looked at their design.
Can you give him his deposition, please? The deposition, yeah, the original?
I would say that there may be some differences in that there are down in a lower area, and I just don't recall. Thank you.
So you can go ahead and open that up. That's the deposition that I took of you.
Page.
If you look at page 18, the bottom, and my question started, and it goes on to the top of page 19. You're aware that the same Assembly Ordinance AO 7884 that imposed limitations on the development of this particular area also applied to the east of Lineary Park? And your answer, I believe it was for both parcels. Question, okay, and are you aware there was no deep subdrain put in on that other side? Answer, I am aware of that. Did I read that correctly?
Just you said page 18.
Bottom of page 18, top of page 19. The bottom of page 18, top of page 19. The question reads, you're aware that the same Assembly Ordinance AO 7884 that imposed limitations on the development of this particular area also applied to the east of Lineary Park. Answer, I believe it was for both parcels. Question, okay, and are you aware that there was no deep subdrain put in that other side? Answer, I am aware of that.
The east for both parts. Okay.
Did I read that correctly?
You did read that correctly.
Were you attempting to be truthful with me, sir?
I was attempting to be truthful with you. Where the same Assembly Ordinance imposed limitations. It did impose limitations on the development of the park, of east of Lineary Park, but each one has to be evaluated, and it doesn't say that what those limitations were. And again, okay, there is no deep subdrain. Okay, I'd forgotten. But that's through the evaluation of the Geotechnical Commission. That's up to them to come up with that.
The idea of a deep subdrain is to remove water to increase stability, correct?
That's correct.
You may or may not know, but, and if you don't, I can ask some later witness, but the stability of the soils can vary depending upon depth, correct? Different layers can have different stability factors.
Depth, soil type, moisture content.
When Shannon and Wilson was asked to do a geotechnical evaluation for the pump station, were you aware that they were told that the pump station wet well was going to be 40 feet deep?
I was not.
It's certainly possible, isn't it, sir, that the reason why Shannon and Wilson was concerned about dewatering this area was because of that proposed depth of the wet well, correct?
I can't speak to that.
That deep subdrain, you agree with me, do not, was the primary driver, if you will, of the increase, the substantial increase in cost of the improvement districts, correct?
I believe that's right.
In your direct testimony, you mentioned, Mr. Owens asked you some questions about the fact that there are no stub outs in the subdrain so that homeowners could hook into them, correct?
That's correct.
And if you were going to put stub outs in that, no one's talking about actually making a connection all the way to somebody's house because there were no houses down there at this point, right?
That's correct.
Okay. What we're talking about when we say a stub out, we're saying just plan ahead of time so that way down deep where this thing is built, there's a connection so that if you need to connect to it, you can, correct? That's what a stub out is?
That's what a stub out typically is.
Okay. And you said that, well, gosh, we don't know what's going to be required because each one of these houses is going to have their foundation approved, right?
I believe the way the discussion went was that the property owners had said that they, and I'm going from memory here, that the property owners had said that we have to design these anyhow. We'll take care of each one as they come up. Each property owner can be responsible for their own property.
Well, and so if indeed the study for their property says, gosh, you need drainage for your foundation, well, it's a little late to hook that into the subdrain now, isn't it?
They're going to have to go back in and make the connection.
you know, would a private contractor ever get blessing from the municipality of Anchorage to put in road, water, and sewer for a subdivision and not put in the shallow utilities at the same time?
Not typically, no.
That's all the questions I have at this time.
Mr. Owens, redirect.
We can either take a break and I can clean up, or if you can deal with my mess, I'll clean up.
I'm only going to look at one exhibit.
Okay. Before I pass, I did have one other question I wanted to ask him. There was one other topic actually I did want to address. I forgot, and I apologize. With regard to how the cost of the road is going to be allocated between various participants, you're aware, I take it, that there are various ways of doing that allocation between the municipality and property owners, correct?
Yeah, I think 1909 spells out the percentage of the breakout of the relative to the property owner's frontage and area, and then the overall, each property's assessed those that way, that percentage.
Okay, and you're aware that in this case, the municipality is saying it should be 70% for the property owners and 30% for the homeowners. Mm-hmm. And are you aware that in 2006, when this was being considered, that out of, I want to say, 7 improvement district projects, road improvement district projects, this is the only one that was 70-30, that all the others were 90-10?
Well, there are two different types of improvement districts that you're comparing to. The 90-10s have already built roads that need upgrades. The storm drain or the road surface may have lived its useful life, and we're replacing those. So where we have a subdivision like this one, where the roads haven't been built, then that's where code requires a percentage breakdown. Okay,
and again, we can allow the assembly members to look at the code, but your understanding is if it's an upgrade, it would be 70-30, correct? Or I mean, if it's an upgrade, it would be 90-10, correct?
That's correct.
But when it's basically, in this, there was a road here at one time, correct?
Yeah, but there was no
nothing left, right?
Nothing left, no subgrade, no nothing that we could use.
Completely reconstructing it.
Absolutely.
And so your understanding is when it's an upgrade, it's a 90-10 split, and when it's a reconstruction, it's a 70-30.
When it's a full construction, not reconstruction, it's a full construction, it's a...
That's it, no further questions.
Mr. Owens?
Thank you. On that last topic, the method, the portion of the code that governs these assessment districts was specified in the ordinances that establish these improvement districts, correct?
It was.
And so you're governed by that. That's not a decision you make. That's one the assembly makes when they approve the district.
By municipal code that's set. That's
Okay.
right.
And if you could take a look at G4 again, that's the computation sheet that shows the breakdown of the adjustments to the RID. Do you have that in front of you?
I'm looking at the spreadsheet that we developed.
Could you take a look at lines 6, 7, and 8 line 6 says total Schedule G payments for non-RID necessary work. Line 7 says percentage of non-RID work, and line 8 is total Schedule G payments for RID work. What's that saying there? Is there some, does Schedule G include some RID and some non-RID, or what's that mean?
We had some improvements as part of the connected to Lineary Park that should not have been assessed to the RID, that the municipality absorbed the cost for park improvements.
And what is the percentage there?
It's percentage of the total.
Percentage of the total work that was non-RID, or a percentage of the overall project?
Percentage of, I believe, Schedule G percentage.
Okay. So in general, in Schedule G, the work that was not RID work was 24.39%.
Yeah.
And so the total spent on Schedule G would be 24% for non-RID work and the balance for RID work?
That's correct.
Okay. So the total isn't all assigned to the RID or charged to the RID?
No.
Okay. Thank you. That's all.
Mr. Staley, any
Nothing
follow-up?
further?
Okay. Are there questions from assembly members? Mr. Owens, are you going to be here for a while longer today yet, or?
Yeah, I can be here.
Okay. I may have questions later. I'm just waiting to see what the other witnesses say. Thank you. At this point, does anybody want to take a 5-minute break?
Yeah, let's take a break, at least so I can clean up my exhibits.
Okay, we will take a 5-minute break. All right, we'll go ahead and get started. Sorry, that was a little longer than 5 minutes. Mr. Owens, your next witness. Hi there, sir. Could you please just state your first name and your last name and spell your last name for the record?
Sure. My name is Joe Bernardini, Bernardini.
Perfect. And if you'll face Ms. Jones over there, she'll go ahead and swear you in.
Please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly and sincerely swear or affirm that the answers you will give in the questions asked of you in these proceedings will be true?
Yes.
Good afternoon, Mr. Bernardini. Thank you for being here today. Could you tell us if you're currently employed?
No.
You can't tell us?
No, I can tell you I'm not employed.
You're retired?
Yes.
And where did you used to work?
I retired from technically the school district, but I work for the city and the feds.
In what capacity?
With the feds, I worked for FAA as a contracting officer for construction contracting. I worked as a contract administrator with Almendorf Air Force Base as a contract administrator for numerous years. I worked with the city at City Hall for 17 years at City Hall, primarily as a construction buyer, and then 4 years with AWW as the purchasing manager and 2 years at ASD as the deputy purchasing officer.
And in the course of this work, I assume you've become familiar with the procurement process as contained in municipal code?
Yes.
And do you recall which title of the code governs procurement?
Title 7.
And is that the same title of the municipal code that covers special improvement districts?
No. Title 7 is strictly for bidding purposes, and special improvements would be somewhere else in the code.
And what does Title 7 do?
Provides us guidelines, provides purchasing personnel guidelines and authorities to buy and sell and trade and swap and pretty much conduct municipal purchases.
Are there any special rules in the procurement code for special improvement districts?
No.
are contracts that the municipality enters into to perform the work contemplated in improvement districts, such as road work. Are those contracts between the municipality and the contractor, or do you act as a middleman for the property owners? What's the contractual relationship there?
Strictly between the municipality and the contractor.
And so who is at risk in those contracts? Risk of a loss if the conditions are different, if the design is defective, if there something goes wrong?
Well, that's a double-edged sword, because if something goes wrong, it's the contractor's fault, then they're at risk. If there are changed conditions or we violate something, a condition of the contract, then the city would be at risk.
Were you involved with the procurement in 2008 for what's known as the Pump Station 10 upgrade project that included the road, water, and lateral improvement districts in the Marston-Foraker area?
Yes.
And what was your role in that?
I was the purchasing person on behalf of AWW.
And in that capacity, were you involved with the solicitation for bids?
Yes.
What was your involvement there?
I reviewed, my involvement is to review the documents that they proposed to put out for solicitation, make sure they were in accordance with established procedures and Title VII procedures. Actually building the solicitation document, answering any questions, conducting pre-bid conferences, answering questions from bidders or whomever else may have questions during the bidding process, the opening of bids, the preparation of the document to give to the board of directors for approval, and once approved, then I would generate the actual contract document, get it out for signature, receive it, make sure we get all the bonds and insurance, and then execute the contract.
Okay. So were you involved in preparing the special provisions for this solicitation?
Only a portion of them.
Did you look at them and review them in preparation for the release? Could you take a look at Exhibit E2? And specifically, would you refer to, well, first, identify the document for the record, please.
I'm sorry?
Identify the document, please.
This is, hang on one second. These are special provisions that were included in the Pump Station 10 upgrade.
Okay, and would you look at Article 3.4 on page 5 of the exhibit?
Okay.
Do you recall the provision in these solicitation documents on how the successful bidder would be evaluated?
Yes,
And what's your recollection of that?
I wrote it.
And what does that state is the process for selecting the low bidder?
This states that if any one of the special improvement districts was above the available funding, that none of the improvement districts would be awarded, and that we would award on the base bid, including the park improvement, subject to sufficient funding.
Okay. You stated that the award for the deductive alternates would be based on available funding or evaluated by, in part, available funding?
It's it says in one of the sentences there, should the overall low bidder submit a bid that exceeds available funding for any improvement district within the deductible alternate, award shall be made to the lowest. Any improvement district project within the deductible alternate, award shall be made only to the lowest responsible bidder for the basic bid only. Should the improvement district projects be within available funding and the park project exceeds funding, the park project may or may not be awarded subject to availability of funds.
So the reference there is to available funding.
Yes,
Does it say that it's subject to the amount of money estimated to be the cost of construction?
no,
Does it say that it's limited to any other specific component of the previous estimates of the cost of the work?
no, it does not.
So it's available funding at the time of the bid.
Yes,
And then at the following paragraph, it says the engineer's estimate for the basic bid and each project within the deductive alternate would be provided at bid opening. Additionally, maximum funding available for each project within the deductive alternates would be provided at bid opening. Do you see that?
yes,
So was a document prepared to record the bids at the time of the bid opening?
yes.
Can you take a look at E4? You recognize this document?
Yes.
Could you describe it, please?
This is the bid abstract of what we recorded when we opened the bids. In fact, that's my handwriting. We open the bids, and then we just record the total amount for schedules. So it's a written document that provides an actual representation of what was opened at the bids.
So where did you get the information that's shown under the engineer's estimate?
The engineer provided an estimate, essentially a bid, like the bidders did. It comes in a sealed document just like the bidders did, and we open it at the time we open bids.
And how about the figures for maximum available funds? Do you recall how you got those numbers?
We got those from the engineer, or from the engineering department anyway.
In the the column under maximum available funds, the row called Schedule D, you'll see the number is $2,701,545. What was your understanding of what that number represented
That represented the maximum amount available for that schedule,
for Schedule D?
for Schedule D.
What was your understanding, if any, about what was in Schedules A, B, and C?
That they were separate from Schedules D, E, F.
Okay. Now, when the bids were opened and recorded, what occurs next?
What occurs next?
Yes, in evaluating the bids.
Okay. Anybody is welcome to review the bids as they were submitted upon opening, at a public opening. So the first step is, anyone want to review the bids? Second step is, when nobody wants to review the bids, then we give the copies of the actual original bids, just photocopies of them. We give them to the engineering department, and they prepare the bid breakdowns.
What do you understand the bid breakdowns? What's that about?
Well, what they do is they go through and make sure that the unit prices and extend those unit prices times the quantities involved, to make sure that the extensions are correct, and itemize any errors that might have been made with bid extensions, and then highlight any other areas that there might be a potential mistake from what was on the bid to what was recorded. So,
Is that what happened here?
yes,
And did that review come up with any conclusions? Anything unusual?
yes, there were items within the apparent low bidder at the time, Roger Hickel, that reflected that they may have made an error in their estimating when we do a simple price analysis, just looking at strictly price on unit line items that indicated that maybe they made a mistake, that their bid might have been too low on that.
And looking again at Exhibit G4, the engineer's estimate, total estimate for the entire package was what, $8,151,000 and some change?
Yes,
And how much was the bid by Prue's Construction for the entire package?
$8,083,932.34.
And how about for Roger Hickle Construction?
$5,987,000. And that's just recorded at bid opening without seeing the bid tabs. I don't know what the mistakes were, so the actual number could be different based on bid extension errors.
But the gross numbers that were recorded at the time of bid opening, did that suggest any red flags?
Yes, absolutely.
How so?
But without looking at the bid tabulations, it's hard to find out where.
But a $2 million difference between their bid and the engineer's estimate as well as the next lowest bidder is significant.
Yes.
So the bids were evaluated, and if you would look at Exhibit E7,
E7?
E is in, what is it in?
Right,
Echo, that's
I
it.
got it.
So E7, Echo 7, is a letter dated July 17th, 2008. Do you recognize this?
Yes,
Is that your signature?
yes.
What was the purpose of this letter?
To request that the apparent low bidder, Roger Hickle, review their bid because we did find some major areas of concern with those line items identified in the third paragraph.
Was this a letter encouraging them to withdraw their bid?
Oh, absolutely not.
Why do you say that?
Well, in the many years, I've seen bids all over the place. Sometimes these are not errors. Maybe sometimes they have assumed to take certain risk or shifted the cost to a different line item. So they may have had a way to do the work in a more expedient manner or more cost-effective manner. But we want to make sure that we don't go in and award a contract to someone that may not be able to do the work or made such a substantial mistake in their bid as to put them in a significant loss and consequently get out of the contract.
And if you take a look at the final paragraph on page 1 of this letter, do you make a recommendation to the contractor?
I'm sorry, say that again?
And the last paragraph on the first page, is there a request or a recommendation? Could you explain that paragraph to us, please?
Well, we asked, this is pretty much standard procedure on construction bids where we find potential errors in the bidding documents, where we ask them to review their bid very carefully, particularly with those line items that we've identified. And then we ask them to provide written verification that their bid is either correct, or if it's not, let us know and we'll take other action.
Okay. Take a look at E8. Did they respond to this letter?
Yes.
And what was their response?
Their response was that they made an error.
And do you recall receiving this letter at that time?
Yes.
And did you accept that as sufficient proof that there was a mistake and let
No,
them off the
not
hook?
at all.
What happened next?
They have to provide documents that clearly show where they made the mistake and give us the work papers so that we can prove, so that we have assurances that it was a legitimate mistake. Otherwise, they could just say, hey, man, we bid too low. The bonding company won't give us a bond. We want out if we don't have proof, and we won't do that.
Take a look at Exhibit 9, E9, I'm sorry,
Okay.
Echo 9. Is that your letter back to the contractor?
Yes, it is.
And what are you asking in that letter?
For them to provide us bidding papers and a letter detailing where the mistakes are, how they were made, what the prices should have been.
And did you receive a response to that letter?
Yes, I
If you
did.
look at Echo 9.
10.
10. And what was the response?
Their response was is that they did make an error, and they provided the work papers. They provided us with an explanation as to why they, how they made the mistake, and what the error, what the corrective price should have been.
And what did you do in response to this letter?
We offered them the ability to withdraw their bid.
Did you evaluate the material that they provided?
Yes,
Did you draw conclusions as to whether they did in fact make a mistake?
yes, they did make. We drew the conclusion that they made an honest mistake.
And did you determine to your own satisfaction whether it was a significant mistake or just an immaterial mistake?
Yeah, no, made the conclusion that it was a very significant mistake.
Okay. And did you correspond again with them?
Yes,
And what was that? Is that Exhibit E11?
yes.
And what are you saying there?
We allowed them to withdraw their bid without penalty, based on the information they provided us.
After allowing Roger Hickle Construction to withdraw their bid, did you then proceed to evaluate the remaining bid from Cruz Construction?
That is concurrent with, when we get the bid tabulations back from the engineer, we review all bids. So it's a price analysis on all bids at the same time. It's all done in one step.
Okay. And why is that?
Well, if you're going to do a price review, that's the only way you can do it, because you're looking at you're looking strictly at those particular line items between the bidders / engineer's estimate.
Is there any
Yeah, ask-
time sensitivity to this contract?
Yes.
Do you recall what that might have been?
Well, it was late in the year, and certain work had to be done late in the year in order to minimize disruption to the neighborhood. Otherwise, we would have, as my understanding, it was relayed to me, was the construction would have lasted over 2 construction seasons, thereby disrupting the neighborhood, the entire subdivision. So the time crunch was try and minimize that and get the work going and try and limit it to 1 construction season, with the exception of certain landscaping improvements.
And what was your role in getting the work going?
Awarding the contract.
And, okay, so I'm just trying to determine whether there was any pressure or desire to get the contract awarded to facilitate construction earlier that year.
I wouldn't say it was pressure. I would say there was a desire to get it going that year. Yeah.
Okay. Could you take a look now at Exhibit E5, Echo 5?
Okay.
Could you define or describe this document, please?
This is a document from the engineering department recommending that we make award.
And on the basis of this document, did you proceed with a recommendation for award?
Yes, we did. We proceeded to get the AWW board approval.
AWW board approval, how was that? Were they issuing the contracts at that time?
Yes. AWW, at that time, the board was essentially the assembly.
So did they have independent contracting authority?
Under Title 31, at that time, they did.
Is it still that way today?
No, it's not.
So the recommendation from AWU's purchasing department went to AWU's board regarding this contract?
That's correct.
And if you take a look at Exhibit Echo 12,
Yes,
Is that the board memo which authorized the contract with Prue's Construction?
yes, it is.
What's the date on that memo?
Signed by the chairman on August 6, 2008.
Now, if you look at Exhibit E14,
Yes,
is that the contract that was issued to Prue's Construction?
well, that's the front page of it, yes, but there's, the document's much thicker, but yes, this is the instrument that provides for the contract.
Sure, it doesn't have all the backup,
No, it certainly doesn't.
but it has the signature lines, is that right?
That's correct.
And what was the date that this was signed by you as purchasing manager?
August 13th,
And the date that it was signed by Prue's Construction?
August 12th.
So the board approved the contract on August 6th, and by August 13th, it's signed by all the parties and effective.
Correct.
And if you take a quick look at Exhibit 8, Echo 18, this is a letter to the Alaska Department of Labor dated August 13th, 2008. What's the purpose of this letter?
This is to notify the Department of Labor that we have awarded a contract subject to their Title 36 wage benefits. So we have to, that's by law, we have to report it.
And does it identify what the contract date, award date is?
Yes, it does. It says the award date is 8/13/08.
Okay. Now, during the time when this contract was under consideration and when the board was going to act on it, were you approached by certain property owners about the contract?
So, the timing, is it when we
In
opened the bid?
about the time between the bids were opened and it was ultimately awarded, did you have communications with property owners?
Yes.
And what was the nature of those?
They wanted to, if I recall correctly, they wanted to delay the award of the contract.
Did they indicate to you that they wanted to terminate any of the improvement districts?
There was implications that, yes, that they were, if I recall correctly, that they wanted to dissolve that agreement, if I recall correctly.
And what was your response with them?
That's not in my purview.
And how about with respect to delaying award of the contract?
I couldn't delay the award according to the terms of the bid. Once we received the documents back from the contractor, I had 5 working days in order to execute the contract.
And did you, with respect to the any discussion of not awarding the improvement district work versus awarding the pump station 10 work, was that a matter that was within your purview that you
No,
could make a
absolutely not.
call on?
I mean, I couldn't change the terms of the bid, if that's what you're asking.
I am. So
I can't by my own volition just award portions of a contract.
So if the invitation says the contract will be awarded based on the total price, so long as the individual components come in within available funds, that's the way it's got to go.
Yes.
Okay, I don't have any other questions.
Good morning, Mr. Bernard. Is it Bernardini?
Yes,
Okay. I apologize in advance if I mispronounce it.
that's fine.
You and I have never spoken before, I don't think, have we?
Not that I know of.
Okay. With regard to Exhibit E2, which is the special provisions that Mr. Owens had you look at,
Yes,
am I to understand that the issue with the park improvements is slightly different than the improvement districts? I mean, it says here that if even if the park project comes in above available funds, it may or may not be awarded, right?
that's correct.
Okay. Do you know what the funding source was for the park improvement?
I don't get involved in funding sources at all. I never know what they are.
With regard to the improvement district, though, you understood that if the bid for any one of those portions, and there were 3 portions, came in above maximum available funds, that whole improvement district project would not go forward at that time, correct?
Well, all 3 of the improvement district
Right.
projects would not go through at that time.
Right, okay. And if I misspoke, I apologize. And you indicated that on E3, or is it E4, actually, the handwritten bid abstract, this is what was more or less filled out at the bid opening, is that right?
Well, not more or less. That's exactly what was filled out at the bid opening.
Okay, and the engineer's estimate, I think you indicated, you didn't have that in advance, nobody had that in advance, that was in a sealed envelope, is that right?
Well, sometimes, in this case, I don't remember, but many times I might get it a day ahead of time, but it's sealed, so I don't know what it is. And we put it in a project file, so we open it just like we would open another bid.
Okay, and the maximum available funding, you said that came from the engineers?
Correct.
Okay. And you understand, don't you, that a project has more than construction costs, correct?
Yes.
So it has, design engineering, construction engineering, maybe rights-of-way acquisition, surveying, all kinds of things in addition to this construction contract, correct?
Correct.
What Pruz was bidding on is what we call the construction contract, correct?
Correct.
That portion of it, okay. And again, you understood that, you never know until the end of the day and the project's done exactly how much it's going to cost, right?
That's correct.
All you can do is have an engineer do an estimate and say, I think it's going to cost this much for the construction contract, this much for the design, this much for that. All you can do is have an engineer's estimate, essentially, right?
In the beginning, yeah.
Yeah. And then when the work's done, then you know, right? At the end of the day, you add it all up, and that's what it is. And it's either over, under, or right on the money.
Well, I think I'm confused, and you're using the engineer's estimate. I'm going on a contractor's bid. The engineer's estimate and the contractor's bid are 2 totally different things.
Okay, granted, I accept that.
Okay.
I accept that. And
So the contractor's bid, at the end of the day, it might be more than what the contractor bid. I'll agree with that. And it may be still under the engineer's estimate. It could be.
right, okay. So you have the engineer's estimate, and that gives you an idea what you can expect the bid to perhaps come in at.
No.
Okay,
That's not the way it works.
all right. What does the engineer's estimate do then?
Well, it gives us the engineer's representation of the work if he had to do the work based on the way we set it. But the engineer cannot assume risk. So they have to bid it straight up exactly like each line item and the specifications say. A contractor can take risk. So therefore, the contractor's bid can come in significantly lower in some cases than what the engineer's estimate is because they're taking risk in finding more efficient ways to do the work. But they assume that risk also. So when you say the engineer's estimate and the contractor's bid are comparative, well, yes, a lot of times they are, and there's a lot of times they're not even close.
Okay, and fair enough, and we can actually see that on E4. We can see that with regard to Schedule A, Roger Hickel was at 2.6 million, Crew's construction was 3.3 and the engineer's estimate was 2.5, correct?
Yeah.
So both of them were above the engineer's estimate, and Crew's was fairly substantially above.
Correct.
And Schedule B, Roger Hickle was at 490, Crew's 891, engineer's estimate. Crew's was $170,000 over, and Hickle was $230,000 under, if my math is correct.
Okay.
And Schedule C, again, there's slight differences, although they're much closer there. The total for Schedules A, B, and C, Hickle was within 200,000 of the engineer's estimate, correct?
Hickle was, roughly, yeah.
And Cruz was roughly $1 million over.
Correct.
Okay. So looking at that, I'd say, gosh, if somebody made a mistake, it was either Cruz made a mistake or he just bid too high, right? I mean, Hickle was much closer to the engineer's estimate.
Okay. Yeah, that's correct. Hickle was closer to the engineer's estimate.
Nobody contacted Cruz about whether they made a mistake, did they?
Not to my knowledge.
With regard to letting somebody out of a contract or letting somebody out of a bid, and submitting a bid is a contract in sorts, isn't it?
No,
Well, it's not a construction contract.
not a contract of any sort.
Well, there are certain limitations on somebody being able to withdraw their bid, aren't there? I mean, I can't just submit a bid and say, if I'm Cruz Construction, I can't say, gosh, I could have come in at $7 million, I'm going to withdraw.
That's correct, they can't. But you're using the term contract.
Okay, well, all right, and I understand that, and we might be thinking about the term differently, but there are certain, if you will, legal or contractual, whatever you want to call it, limitations on their ability to just willy-nilly withdraw.
That's correct.
Okay. And there are certain legal or other limitations on the municipality's ability to let somebody withdraw.
I don't know about legal, but there are limitations, yes.
Okay. And normally, if the municipality is procuring this, it would be the assembly that would make that decision, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay. And the AWWU board at that time had the ability to act as the assembly, correct?
That's correct.
So the AWWU board had the authority to release Hickle from this bid.
Yes.
But they didn't do
Well,
it, did
no,
they?
wait. The board doesn't make that decision on release, neither does the assembly. The assembly doesn't release a bidder from a bid. The assembly approves of the award of a bid.
And so anybody can willy-nilly let somebody out?
No.
Well, who can?
Purchasing officer?
And that's somewhere set forth in the law, as far as you know?
So it would be in Title VII.
The maximum available funding, you said that came from the engineers, correct?
Yes.
I think you have up there, and it's probably in the front of the binder, two exhibits, N1, N2. Have you seen these before?
I have no idea what they are.
Okay. Have you seen anything like this before, an engineer's estimate?
Yes.
And if you're looking at N1, you'll see there's a top paragraph for construction costs, $840,000 and change. Do you see that?
Yes.
Then the second paragraph says, note the following items of work are funded in part by the lid, but will be constructed with the Pump Station 10 upgrade project. Do you see that?
Yes.
Did you have an understanding that a portion of you understood that schedules A, B, and C were the PS10 project, correct?
Correct.
And did you have an understanding that a portion of schedules A, B, and C were going to be funded or paid for by the WID, LID, or RID?
No.
Okay, you didn't understand that.
No.
Okay. This appears to say that, doesn't it? Note the following items of work are funded by the lid, but will be constructed with the PS10 upgrade.
That's what that document says.
Okay. And you'll see the total construction funding is $1,088,660, correct?
Yes.
And that is indeed the exact maximum funding that the engineer plugged in for you, correct? In Exhibit
Yes.
E4?
Yes?
So the engineer was attempting to give you maximum funding based upon everything that was going to be funded by that WID, correct? Including those parts that were going to be built with PS10.
My understanding is Schedule E, which is apparently the WID, was inclusive of only the work included in Schedule E. That's my understanding, not having seen this document before.
Okay, again, that was just the engineer that gave you that number,
Yes.
right? Okay. But the engineer's estimate, you agree that the engineer's estimate for the WID included those portions that were going to be funded by the lid but constructed with PS10, correct?
If that's what this document says. Again, I'm not familiar with this document, so it appears as though that might be correct. I believe that this says in part, but, so I don't know which parts are in or out, but anyway.
Sure. If you'll take a look at Exhibit E3,
E3. Okay.
and what is that?
Hang on. I don't know. I don't remember this. I don't know what this is, to tell you the truth.
Okay,
This appears to be approves bid. I don't know what is on 1-1 because I don't recall seeing that. But after 1-1 and you go to pages 1 through, well, the rest of the document appears to be Cruz's line item bids. But again, I can't attest to what is on page 1-1. I don't recall ever seeing this.
Take a look at Exhibit N2, and
All right.
but keep that other Exhibit E3 in front of you. This is the engineer's estimate for the WID, correct?
This is, well, yes, it says DSR though, which is a design study report construction cost estimate, which is done early on. But as you pointed out earlier, it matches the number on the G4, or E4.
In terms of the maximum funding.
Yes.
Okay. And the number that matches the maximum funding is the total WID construction cost, which includes the upper paragraph and then the middle paragraph, which says, note the following items of work are funded by the WID but will be constructed with the PS10 upgrade project, correct?
That's what it says.
Okay. And so then if you take a look at E3, and if you look at page 13 of 14,
13 of 14. Okay.
this is Schedule F, says at the top, which is the WID, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and so then it has all the Schedule F items, the amount that Cruz bid, and then it has the lower paragraph again, WID items from Schedule C, Pump Station 10 upgrade improvements that they're saying are going to be funded by the WID, to come up with a total WID construction cost by looking at what Cruz bid for both Schedule F and certain line items from Schedule C, correct?
Okay. Yes. That's what this says.
Okay.
I got to back up though. This isn't what Cruz. This isn't the actual bid that Cruz filled out. So this is a compilation of something of that.
Right, I understand
But
that.
I did say that earlier. I thought it was.
Yeah, this isn't their whole bid. This is just line items from their bid,
I see
correct?
that now.
Okay.
I'm not familiar with this either. But
And so we see that this is saying that the WID is going to pay for C1, trench excavation and backfill to various depths, C2, furnished trench backfill type 2, C3, furnished trench backfill, disposable and unusable material, et cetera, correct?
Yes, I see that.
And if we look at N2 regarding the WID and the engineer's estimate, again, if we look at that middle section that talks about items being funded by the WID but constructed with PS10, we see the same thing basically. Furnished track fill type 2, furnished trench backfill type 3, disposable of unusable surplus material, et cetera, correct?
I think there are, I note one discrepancy, but they essentially are the same.
Yeah, I mean, this N2 is an engineer's estimate that was done at the 35% level, I'll represent to you, in order to get the property owners to approve an estimate. This estimate at the bottom is the $1,229,000. That's the approved estimate. So I'll represent to you. So there might be some minor changes, but again, this document anticipates, this middle paragraph of this document, N2, is essentially anticipating these line items from Schedule C being funded by the WID, correct?
That's what it appears to. But again, I'm not familiar with this document, so I don't know what it has to do with for bidding purposes. But go ahead.
When you opened the bids and you looked to see whether or not the bids had come in under maximum funding, did you have any conversation with the engineers? And if so, who and what was said?
I'm sorry, could you say that again? Repeat that?
When you opened the bids to ascertain whether or not the bids had come in within the maximum funding, did you have any conversations with the engineers who had given you those maximum funding numbers? And if so, who did you talk with and what was said?
Well, I don't recall. Generally, we discuss, once we do the bid tabulations, which is the compilation of the unit prices and making sure that they're all correct and everything, then we have conversations with the engineers about specific line items and, hey, help me out, does this look right, what's wrong with this, identifying potential mistakes in bid. Generally, I don't talk about what the maximum, I don't talk at all about what the maximum costs are for the project or what the available funding is. I mean, if I understand your question correctly.
I think you do.
I don't talk about that.
Okay.
Get some more.
I think I have an unopened bottle.
Thanks.
If you'll turn to Exhibit 30, which is going to be in one of those other notebooks next to your table.
Thank you. All right, thanks. 30. Okay.
And if you'll turn in to page 10 of 15, at the top, this appears to be an email sent from Mr. Fink dated August 11, 2008 to Mr. Coleman, yourself, and a variety of others, correct?
Yes.
All right. And it states, our RID is currently 31% more than the most recent RID being completed now in 2007. Market data does not indicate a 2% difference. We met on July 25th, 2008, and I specifically asked if the bid had been awarded. The answer was no. I asked then that you cancel the bid and not award it. At this point, the contract had not been signed, correct? August 11th?
That's correct.
Okay. And indeed, you had met with Mr. Fink and others, property owners, on July 25th, correct? Or certainly before this, and he references a July 25th date.
Okay, yes.
Okay. And you understood, and I think you told Mr. Owens this, you understood that they were basically saying, don't award the improvement district portion of this contract, correct?
That was their position.
Okay. And do you know, sir, how many of the people potentially responsible property owners for this improvement district, how many of them had approved it to begin with? What percentage?
No idea.
Okay, I'll represent you for the RID, sir. It was 57%. You don't have any reason to dispute that.
I don't have any reason to dispute that.
Okay. And so when you met with Mr. Fink and others and they said don't award this, do you know what percentage they represented?
I do not.
So do you know whether, assuming that they had been a part of that 57% and had approved it, and they represented 12 to 15%, such that their withdrawal of support dropped you below 50%, would that have made a difference to you?
To me, not
Yeah.
at all.
Okay, you still would have gone forward with the contract, correct?
Absolutely.
All right. And so you didn't feel as though the property owners had any power or authority to demonstrate any sort of remonstrance or withdrawal of the agreement to go forward with this?
No, I don't think that's correct. You said if I felt that they could or couldn't. Well, I was doing what the bid told, what I had to do within the bid and Title VII. Whether they have redress and withdrawing their support for the improvement districts, okay, they probably have that right, but not with me. I mean, they would have to go through certain channels. I'm executing a contract.
Okay, but if they had the right to withdraw their agreement to be responsible for the payment of this, and they're telling you we're going to exercise our right to do that, and then you enter into a contract, that's going to leave the municipality potentially on the hook for something without being able to get paid back, isn't it? Wouldn't you want to exercise some caution?
I don't have that ability. I don't have the ability to say, no, I'm not going to award the contract based on that conversation.
Okay. Nothing in the contract required you to make a decision and give it to Prue's Construction in anything less than 40 days, correct? There might have been time sensitivity issues that you had in your head about getting this done.
That's not correct. MASS, which was incorporated as part of the bidding documents, requires that once approved, I had so many days to get the contract to the contractor for signature.
Okay, once approved, though, but
Once it's approved, I am obligated to get the contract to the contractor for signature within X amount of days.
okay. But what is the limitation for you getting it approved?
I don't know. I don't think there is one. I
Okay.
mean, taking it from bid opening to award, is that what or to recommendation of award?
Yeah.
Well, the bids are only good for 45 days, so I mean, that's as far as I can go.
Okay. And what day were they open, do you recall?
I don't know, it's in exhibit, if we go back to E4, you're going to find that date right there. Whatever date was there, I don't recall off the top of my head. July 15th.
July 15th, okay. So basically, you had till the end of August to award or not award this contract.
No, I
45
had to the end of August to accept or reject the bids.
Right, okay. So you had till the end of August to accept or reject the bids.
Yeah.
Okay. And in July 25th, 10 days after opening, you had a meeting with certain property owners, and they said, please don't award the improvement district portion.
Yes.
And then they followed that up in written emails with you saying, please don't approve, or please don't award the improvement district portion of this contract.
Yes.
And it wasn't just Mr. Fink, Mr. Krieg and others also sent you emails, correct?
I don't recall. I just recall Mr. Fink. I don't recall the rest of the names. But yes, other people. There were some that came up.
Again, looking at Exhibit 34, page 3,
34? Page 3.
it's an email dated August 8th from Mr. Fink. And again, his bullet point number 1, do not award the bid to the sole bidder, pull it and rebid the next year, correct?
That's what it says, yes.
Right. And if you look at page 2, there's an email dated August 11th from Mr. Krieg. They're addressed to you, raising concerns, and page 1 is your response to him, is that correct?
Which date? There are two dated August 11th, so I'm assuming you're talking about,
I'm talking about the one at the top is from
The
Mr.
top, okay.
Krieg to a bunch of people, and
yes,
primarily you, it's addressed to you. Then your response starts at the bottom of that page and actually goes to page 1, because these are in reverse chronological order. So your response, well, maybe I'm, no, actually not, I take that back. Your response there is to Mr. Fink. Your response to Mr. Krieg is page 1, and it's dated August 12th. You see that?
yes.
Looking down at the third paragraph, you say a majority of the homeowners in the improvement districts approved these projects subject to the costs coming in below the approved amount. All improvement district costs are under the approved homeowner amounts. Again, did you have any discussion with the engineers to ascertain whether or not, in fact, this bid came in under the maximum funding as they anticipated it?
I think there's a disconnect, I think, in the sense that my email says approved amounts, mine meaning what was the maximum amounts represented on the Exhibit E4.
Right. The maximum amount on Exhibit E4, that bid abstract, which for the road district was $2.7 million, correct?
I didn't have a conversation with what the maximum amount could have been for the entire project with the engineers, no.
Okay. What about E4? Did you have a conversation, what about the road improvement district, that 2.7? Did you have a conversation with the engineers saying, where did you get this number, and is Bruce bid good?
No, I don't recall having that conversation.
Okay. And so when you make this representation to Mr. Krieg that all improvement district costs are under the approved homeowner amounts, you're just going off of what numbers were given to you and your understanding of what those numbers meant, correct? one point, Mr. Fink asks you to wait a week, and you decline.
Correct.
Was there any reason you couldn't wait a week?
Yes.
Why?
Bid said I had 5 days from the date I received the contract documents to execute the contract.
Well, you had 5 working days, and you received the executed contract from Cruz on August 12th, correct?
Yes.
So you could have waited 5 working days after
No
that.
need to wait.
You could have waited 5 working days after
I
that,
could have,
but you didn't.
documents were in order.
No further questions.
Redirect, Mr. Owens?
No.
Are there questions from assembly members? Okay, I do have a few questions for you, Mr.
Okay.
Bernardini. Let's see here. Okay, if we can go to Exhibit E11,
E11,
Echo 11.
one moment.
The third paragraph down references.
One moment, please. I haven't.
Oh, sorry.
I had to change books here.
No worries.
E11. E11, okay?
Yes, okay. So here there's been an exchange. You've informed, previous emails or letters, you've informed Hickle, you review your bid, make sure you didn't make a mistake. They come back, they say they have. And you reference a fax dated July 21st, 2008. Is that, do you know if that's in any of these exhibits?
I do not know if they're in any of the exhibits, but I do recall the gist of what was in that.
Do you recall, can you summarize that fax for me?
They suggest, in fact, that might be one of the exhibits. Let me check. I think it is actually one of the exhibits. When I say fax, I think that accompanied their letter declaring the mistake. Okay. One moment, please. All right, that's not the, I'm looking at Exhibit E10, and that's not the document that I thought it was. But as I recall it, they were suggesting that there was ambiguities in the specifications on how the contractors would get paid for certain items, and that they claimed that they may have been ambiguous and that the bid should be rejected.
Okay. And apparently you disagreed. That's why you let them withdraw.
Not for that reason.
Or rather, wait, let me rephrase that. Okay. My point to this one is they were asking you to basically rebid the whole thing.
Yes, they did ask us to reject all bids and rebid.
And you, my understanding of this is because you went ahead with the Prue's bid, you rejected their notion to rebid all bids or rebid the project.
The reason that paragraph was written is if a contractor is unsure how they're going to be paid on any ambiguities in the specifications, the time to bring those questions up is to do them during the bidding period. They submitted a bid. Once you submit a bid, you are satisfied with all the requirements of that bid. To come back in later after you've lost the bid and say, hey, I made a mistake, I wasn't sure how to bid this, and then claim a mistake, wouldn't necessarily be good faith on our part just to reject all bids based on that without having more information.
Did you have any other reason? Was anything brought to your attention besides that? Maybe their confusion, if we call it that. Did you have any other reason why you thought, or they brought up that they thought you should rebid the project?
No.
Okay. Also, there was an email, and I forget, I didn't write down the number, or there was a correspondence that referenced the fact that VEI verified that Hickel did make, in fact, a mistake. Yeah. Give me 1 second, I'll find it. Okay. Oh, no, E5. Okay, it's Echo 5.
Yes?
About midway down there, it says Roger Hickel Contracting declared an error in their bid and requested to be allowed to withdraw without penalty. The claim was independently verified by VEI consultants. Can you describe how that occurred?
No. I give the information to the engineers on the declaration of a mistake, and we review it concurrently. I don't know how it got to VEI, but
Okay, that might be a question for Mr. Coleman since he wrote this. Okay,
You take a look at Exhibit E6.
E6. Oh, there, okay. That's helpful. Thank you, Mr. Owens. So Echo 6 will answer that question. Okay, moving on. Typically in project awards, when you have, what are the parameters that the purchasing department uses, or Title VII, or what is the document that controls allowing a bidder to withdraw? Or what is the standard, and where does that standard come from?
there isn't, I don't recall exactly. I don't think there's anything exactly in Title VII about it, and I'm just going from recollection because I haven't dealt in Title VII in several years. But absence of that, we use state statute and federal guidelines.
Okay.
So based on experience and whatever training you've had.
Okay. If a bidder in a situation is, they feel they want to protest, basically, they don't get awarded the bid for some reason, what is the mechanism in order to do that?
They file protest with either, first with a purchasing officer and ask that we take it to the mayor of the assembly. That's per Title VII.
Sure.
So if a bidder's aggrieved by anything, that they have the right to protest. Initially, the way it initially works is the purchasing officer makes a determination as to the merits of a protest, and then we'll forward that recommendation either to the assembly or to the mayor, depending on depending on dollar thresholds and other requirements of Title VII.
And in this situation, did Roger Hickel contractor file a protest
No one filed
of the
a
bid
protest.
award? Okay. Now, with respect to, there was some discussion about who allows for the bids to be withdrawn when it goes to the assembly or when it would go to the AWU board at this time. If the legislative body or the awarding body, being AWU Board of Directors, didn't concur that Roger Hickel Contracting should have been able to withdraw, could they have just voted no on the Prus contract? Or could they have awarded it to Roger Hickel anyway?
Well, in the 17 or 18 years I worked for City Hall, never, can I recall, was a withdrawal request presented to the Assembly for approval. What has always been done, and the Assembly has seen it in more than one occasion on the bid abstracts, when we come to the Assembly or the Board with a recommendation of award, on the back of that is the bid abstract, and it lines out the bids. Like we did in this case, we said there was a bid mistake, HICO was allowed to withdraw the bid. The Assembly only has the ability to award or not award. You do not have the ability to say we don't accept that withdrawal. So,
But my question is, if it comes before the AWU board in this instance, the AWU board has knowledge that Roger Hickel Contracting and Pruse were the two bidders.
yes,
They see the amounts. They can clearly see that the low bidder was not the bidder that was chosen.
yes.
If they disagreed with your choice or the choice of the purchasing department, could they not have just rejected the Pruse contract at that
Yes,
time?
they could have. And that's always a prerogative of the Assembly and, in our case, the AWW board, and any board memorandum.
And to follow up on this particular contract, was there, when this came before the board, were you there to present?
Yes,
And did they discuss the fact, the specific mistakes that Roger Hickel Contracting had made?
I believe there was a discussion about it. I don't absolutely recall everything about the board. The board goes, like the Assembly, goes through so many items. But,
Sure.
I don't recall this being an issue.
Okay. So just to follow up, are you aware of if in fact this entire contract would have been rebid within Title VII or within your experience, are you aware of any potential impacts or liability the city might incur from the potential winning bidder that wasn't awarded?
If we rebid it?
Yeah.
Yes. If funding was available to make the award and we rejected the bid just because we didn't like that bid or bidder, resolicited on the exact same specifications without changing anything, I think there would be a very good legal argument from the aggrieved bidder that wasn't awarded the contract that the municipality wasn't dealing in good faith. And I think they would have a very good argument that they were at least due, at least as a minimum, bid and prep cost and potentially lost profits.
Okay. And I had one more question, and it was in regard to the bid specifically. I think it's a G one. Let me just look here real quick. Echo 2. E2.
E2?
Yes, Echo 2.
Echo 2.
It's page 5 of 6. You seem like you're probably the best person to make sure I completely understand this. So as I am looking at Article 3.4, is it your testimony that though there are three components, essentially, what we're talking about today, the lid, the WID, the RID, those three components, there's an overall project budget, and it's your testimony that this bid was awarded within the bid criteria?
Absolutely, yes. Within the bid criteria, yes, ma'am.
So you've heard some of the discussion that one of these aspects may have exceeded the individual project allowance, appropriation, money, and that maybe potentially made that all three of those maybe not should have been awarded. Would you agree or disagree with that?
I don't know of any discrepancies. I disagree with it. It should have been awarded, as we've said it. I mean, we did what we said we were going to do in the bid, as it was represented in the bid, as it was represented at the bid opening, and as it was represented by the certification of funds. So, in my brain, we did exactly what we were supposed to do.
Okay, thank you. Is there any follow-up questions to my questions? Mr.
I
Owens?
do have one observation. With respect to the standard that applies in evaluating mistake, additional information is available to the panel in Appendix 2 of our hearing brief.
I have a brief follow-up to Madam Chair's questions. Madam Chair asked you a question, Mr. Bernardini, about, what if you had basically said, we're not going to accept any bids, would there have been any liability or ramifications to AWWU? Do I recall the question correctly? And you said,
If we rejected bid, if we didn't accept any of the bids?
yeah, if you told Pruz, I'm sorry, Hickel pulled out and we're not going to accept your bid either. We're rejecting all bids and we're going to rebid this project.
Okay, I recall that, yes.
Yeah, and there would have been no ramification to AWWU in that circumstance, would there have been?
If we had rebid exactly as we had, yes, there could have been.
Well,
Absolutely could have been.
turn to Exhibit 44, please.
Exhibit 44.
This is the invitation to bid, correct?
Yes,
And if you'll turn to page 2, third paragraph from the bottom,
yes,
it says AWWU reserves the right to reject any and all bids, correct?
that's correct.
All right, and so you reserved the right to reject all bids, correct?
Absolutely.
And you're aware, are you not, sir, that the law always allows you to reject a sole remaining bid, or if there is only one bid in a competitive bidding environment, correct? If you've put it out for competitive bid and there's only one bid, or there's only one bid left at the end of somebody withdrawing, the law always allows you to reject all bids.
I can reject that. We could reject all bids anyway, whether I have one bidder or 10 bidders,
Okay.
depending on the circumstance.
And
But
you-
we have to act in good faith also.
And I understand that.
Okay.
And I understand that. You have to act in good faith. But you've reserved the right to reject all bids. And so you could have rejected the sole remaining bid, Pruz bid, after finding that Hickel had made a mistake, correct?
Not just based on the sole fact that Hickel made a mistake.
Not on that basis, on the basis that you reserved the right in your
Could have.
invitation to bid.
We could have, if we had had a valid reason, we could have.
Well, you've reserved the right to do that,
Yes.
right?
And yes, there's court cases, bunches that says we always have that right. Okay.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Okay, we are done with you, Mr. Bernardini. For the moment, I don't think we'll need you to stick around. I don't see anybody flagging me down here, so thank you so much.
All right, thank you.
Just 1 second. All right. Well, we are about to break for lunch, and I will just let you both know that the questions that I was going to have for Mr. Oswald have been addressed through purchasing testimony. So, but I do anticipate asking Mr. Nuss for questions probably this afternoon, depending how the witnesses go. Okay. So we will break for lunch. We will be back here. It's 12:30 now. We'll be back at, let's say, 1:15. Is that all right?